Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 found the Chaquetrix got harem of all alien queen. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Celestial Key. The quantum stabilizers on Ben Tennyson's ship groaned under the strain of the nebula's gravitational anomalies. Swirling cosmic gases painted the viewport in brilliant purples and blues, occasionally flashing with electromagnetic discharges that resembled distant lightning. Ben's fingers danced across the control panel with practiced precision, making minute adjustments to the shield harmonics. Structural integrity at 72% and falling, reported the ship's AI in its characteristically calm voice. Recommended course of action: immediate withdrawal from the Cygnus anomaly. Ben's emerald eyes narrowed, the reflected light of the nebula casting shadows across his face. At 25, he'd long outgrown the gangly awkwardness of his teenage years. His jawline had sharpened, complemented by a light stubble he hadn't bothered to shave before this mission. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, a souvenir from a Tetraman mercenary 3 years prior. "Not happening, Primus," Ben replied, naming the AI after the organization T. had commissioned both it and the ship. "We've tracked this signal across 7 sectors. I'm not turning back when we're this close." He adjusted course, threading the vessel between 2 particularly violent gravitational eddies. The ship shuddered but held its trajectory. On his wrist, the Omnitrix glowed with a steady emerald pulse, almost as if responding to something within the nebula's heart. The signal's origin point is 20 kilometers ahead, but sensor resolution is deteriorating rapidly, Primus noted. Unknown material composition is interfering with standard scanning protocols. Ben allowed himself a small smile. Unknown materials are kind of my specialty. The nebula suddenly parted, revealing a structure that by all rights shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space. Susp. Ended in the cosmic storm floated a massive temple complex, its architecture defying conventional physics. Spires of obsidian material twisted upward in impossible spirals. Archways connected floating platforms that orbited a central chamber pulsing with a light that shifted between emerald and sapphire. The entire structure rotated slowly, yet remained perfectly stable despite the chaotic environment surrounding it. "That's not in any plumber database," Ben whispered, genuinely awestruck. "Confirmed. Structure matches no known architectural styles in catalogued space-faring civilizations," Primus responded. "Material composition scan indicates elements not present on standard periodic table. Age estimate: inconclusive, but preliminary readings suggest it predates formation of current galactic arm." Ben leaned forward, studying the temple. "Any signs of life?" "Negative, though energy signatures suggest automated systems remain operational. The signal we've been tracking originates from the central chamber." Decision made, Ben activated the ship's docking protocols. "Find us a stable approach vector." "I'm going in." "Benjamin," Primus began, using his full name in what Ben had come to recognize as the AI's version of concern, "might I suggest requesting backup from Plumber headquarters? This structure falls well outside mission parameters." Ben chuckled, standing and stretching his arms above his head. "Since when have I ever stayed within parameters?" The ship maneuvered through the gravitational distortions with increasing difficulty, eventually securing a tenuous position adjacent to one of the floating platforms. Ben moved to the equipment locker, methodically checking his gear: standard issue gravity boots, multi-spectrum scanner, emergency beacon, and compact medical kit. "Atmosphere scan?" he asked, pausing before selecting his breathing apparatus. Unexpectedly, the structure maintains an internal atmosphere composed primarily of nitrogen and oxygen, with trace elements consistent with Class M planets. Temperature registers at 19 degrees Celsius. "Breathable, but I would recommend caution." Ben nodded, adding the breather to his belt as a precaution rather than wearing it immediately. "Keep the engines hot. If I'm not back in 3 hours, follow standard protocols." "Understood." Transmitting structural scans to your Omnitrix as they process. The airlock cycled open, and Ben stepped onto the narrow boarding platform. The artificial gravity of the temple immediately took hold, an unsettling sensation as it felt stronger than Earth normal but somehow lighter simultaneously. As if his mass had both increased and decreased. "That's new," he muttered, testing his balance with a few experimental steps. The architecture appeared even more impossible up close. Surfaces that seemed solid from a distance revealed intricate patterns upon approach, mathematical fractals etched into the material at microscopic levels, creating an effect that made the walls appear to ripple like water when viewed peripherally. Ben approached the nearest entrance, a triangular doorway twice his height. No visible controls or mechanisms indicated how to open it, but as he approached, the Omnitrix pulsed brightly. The doorway responded, its solid surface becoming translucent before disappearing entirely. Interesting security system, Ben noted to himself, stepping across the threshold cautiously. Inside, the temple defied expected logic. Corridors stretched longer than the exterior dimensions should allow. Gravity shifted subtly between chambers, sometimes pulling at oblique angles that would have been disorienting if not for Ben's extensive experience with alien environments. Light emanated from everywhere and nowhere, casting no shadow. Yet illuminating every detail with perfect clarity. Ben followed the signal, which grew stronger as the Omnitrix's pulse quickened. Each chamber he passed through featured different architectural styles. Some resembled ancient Earth civilizations while others appeared utterly foreign to human conception. One room contained what looked like suspended liquid metal forming constantly shifting constellations. Another housed crystalline structures that emitted harmonics when he passed, creating an eerie melody that seemed to follow him. After 20 minutes of navigation, Ben reached a circular chamber with 13 doorways arranged like hours on a clock, with an additional entrance at the center. The signal led directly to the central door. Of course it couldn't be simple, he sighed, studying the doorways. Each was marked with symbols that shifted and changed as he watched, preventing any attempt at translation. The Omnitrix suddenly flared, projecting a holographic interface Ben had never seen before. Glyphs matching those on the doors appeared above his wrist, rearranging themselves into patterns. New function. Ben wondered aloud, watching as the hologram stabilized into a sequence of symbols. Acting on instinct, he approached the doorways, comparing the sequence to the changing markings. When the fifth doorway momentarily displayed the same pattern, Ben lunged forward, passing through just as the symbols began to shift again. Beyond lay a spiraling ramp descending into darkness. Unlike the previous chambers, this passage was austere, devoid of ornamentation. Walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence that intensified as he descended, matching rhythm with the Omnitrix. At the bottom, Ben entered a hexagonal chamber dominated by a central pedestal. Hovering above it was an object that defied easy description, a crystalline matrix shaped vaguely like a gauntlet, composed of materials that shifted between solid, liquid, and something else entirely. Rs flowed through it like blood through veins, primarily emerald and sapphire with occasional flashes of ruby and amber. That's definitely what we've been tracking, Ben whispered, approaching cautiously. The artifact responded to his presence, the flowing colors accelerating their circulation. As Ben moved closer, the Omnitrix's activity intensified correspondingly, until both were pulsing in perfect synchronization. Ben raised his scanner, carefully documenting the artifact. Structure appears to be some kind of advanced technology, possibly a weapon or tool. Material composition, inconclusive. Energy output exceeding scanner parameters. He circled the pedestal, noting how the artifact seemed to rotate to track his movement, always presenting what appeared to be its front toward him. The resemblance to a gauntlet became clearer from certain angles, 5 protrusions extending from a central mass, reminiscent of fingers. Primus, are you receiving this telemetry? Ben asked into his communicator. Static answered him. Interference from the temple, or deliberate communication blocking. He mused, continuing his analysis independently. A soft sound, nearly imperceptible, caught his attention. Ben froze. Enhanced senses developed through years of combat training, picking up the faint disturbance of air that indicated he was no longer alone. Without turning, Hikazu. Ally moved his hand closer to the Omnitrix. Considering the value of what you've found, you demonstrate admirable restraint in not immediately claiming it, came a voice like crystalline wind chimes. Feminine yet resonating with harmonic undertones impossible for human vocal cords to produce. Ben turned slowly, years of diplomatic training preventing any sudden movements that might be interpreted as hostile. The chamber's entrance was now occupied by a figure unlike any species he'd encountered before. She and Ben immediately understood this was a female of her species, though the indica tors were subtle, stood nearly 7 feet tall, her body composed of what appeared to be living crystal with an internal structure of pure energy. Her form was humanoid but refined to mathematical perfection, with proportions that followed the golden ratio precisely. Her skin was primarily transparent crystal with opalescent highlights that shifted colors with her movements, while pulsing light moved through internal channels like a circulatory system. Where a human would have hair, she possessed delicate crystalline filaments that floated around her head as if underwater, occasionally emitting tiny sparks of light. Her eyes were the most remarkable feature, faceted gemstones that rotated within crystalline sockets, refracting light in patterns too complex to follow. She wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor composed of an unknown white metal, etched with mathematical formulas and star charts. A translucent cape of material resembling aurora borealis flowed from her shoulders, shifting colors with each movement. Ben inclined his head respectfully. I've found that touching unknown alien artifacts without understanding them first tends to create more problems than it solves. He straightened, meeting her gaze directly. I'm Ben Tennyson, Magister rank plumber and Earth representative to the Galactic Council. May I ask who I'm addressing? The crystalline being's faceted eyes rotated, analyzing him with obvious interest. When she moved forward, her movements were precise and fluid, each step producing a soft musical tone as her crystalline form resonated with the temple's material. You are indeed, as your reputation suggests, Benjamin Tennyson. Cautious when appropriate, yet bold when necessary. Her voice contained multiple tones speaking simultaneously, creating complex harmonies. I am Lumina, sovereign scientist of the Stellar Concordance and Queen of the Crystallis Collective. She gestured toward the hovering artifact. What you have found is the Chaquetrix, an artifact my people have sought for 16 generations. We tracked its energy signature to this temple complex, though you appear to have reached it moments before my expedition. Ben no. Ted how she positioned herself equidistant between him and the artifact, close enough to reach it if necessary, but not making any aggressive moves to claim it. Her posture remained formal but alert, suggesting advanced combat training despite her scholarly title. The Chaquetrix, Ben repeated, testing the unfamiliar word. I've never heard of it in any plumber archives, and I have clearance for most restricted information. Your archives would not contain this information, Lumina replied, her internal lights pulsing in what Ben interpreted as emphasis. The Chaquetrix predates your spec.ie.'s evolution by approximately 2.7 billion years. It was created during the third cosmic expansion by beings who existed before the current universal laws stabilized. As if responding to its name, the artifact's colors swirled more rapidly, the emerald hue becoming momentarily dominant before settling back into its rhythmic color cycle. It appears to be responding to you, Lumina observed, our tone shifting to one of scientific curiosity, or perhaps to the device you wear. The Omnitrix, Ben confirmed, noticing how the two objects seemed to pulse in synchronization. It's been acting strangely ever since we entered this nebula, almost as if it recognized something. Lumina's crystalline filaments rippled with increased energy. Fascinating. The Omnitrix was created by Azimuth of the Galvan, correct? His understanding of transdimensional bioenergy matrices might have inadvertently created resonance patterns similar to those used by the ancient architects. She took another step forward, extending a crystalline hand toward Ben's wrist, though not touching it. May I? Ben hesitated only briefly before extending his arm. Years of experience had taught him to read intentions across species barriers. And Lumina's body language suggested genuine scientific curiosity rather than deception. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated rapidly as she examined the Omnitrix, occasionally emitting narrow beams of light that seemed to scan the device. Remarkable. The quantum entanglement signatures are harmonic with the Chaquetrix's resonance frequency. This cannot be coincidental. Meaning, Ben prompted, watching her careful examination. Meaning, Benjamin Tennyson, that your Omnitrix and the Chaquetrix may have been designed to interact. She looked up from his wrist to meet his eyes. The ancient architects were known for creating complementary technologies that would only achieve full functionality when united. It was their method of ensuring that no single civilization could access their most powerful tools without cooperation. The temple suddenly shuddered violently, nearly throwing both of them off balance. Dust fell from surfaces that had appeared seamlessly solid moments before. That's not good, Ben stated unnecessarily, glancing toward the ceiling. Lumina's internal light patterns shifted to rapid, pulsing configurations. The nebula's gravitational anomalies are intensifying. This structure exists partially outside conventional spacetime. It normally remains unaffected by external phenomena. Another tremor, stronger than the first, shook the chamber. A crack appeared in one wall, leaking brilliant energy that coruscated like lightning. Something's destabilizing the temple's dimensional anchors, Lumina said, her harmonics taking on urgent frequencies. If the structure collapses while we're inside, we'll be trapped in the void between realities. Ben's communicator crackled to life with Primus's voice, heavily distorted. Ben, ship detecting, catastrophic. Collapse imminent. Minutes, leave immediately. Making quick calculations, Ben looked between Lumina and the Chaquetrix. I'm guessing we can't leave this artifact here to be destroyed. Absolutely not, Lumina confirmed, her voice resonating with alarm. The Chaquetrix contains energy equivalent to several supernovae. Its uncontrolled destruction could destabilize this entire sector. Of course it could, Ben muttered. He approached the pedestal decisively. Any specific way to safely remove it? Lumina moved beside him, her crystalline form emitting increasingly intense light as her internal energy responded to the emergency. The containment protocols require specific deactivation sequences that would take hours too. The temple lurched violently, this time tilting at an angle that sent loose objects sliding across the floor. The pedestal itself remained stable, anchored by forces that transcended normal physics, but the Chaquetrix began to pulse erratically. We don't have hours, Ben stated flatly, years of crisis management taking over. He examined the artifact closely, noting how its pulses now matched the increasingly erratic behavior of the Omnitrix. It's trying to synchronize with the Omnitrix. I think it wants me to take it. Lumina's crystalline features rearranged in what Ben recognized as an expression of alarm. That would be extremely dangerous. The Chaquetrix was designed to be used by beings with entirely different physiological structures. The energy transfer alone could kill me. Wouldn't be the first time I've heard that warning. Ben interrupted with a grim smile. He flexed his hand, hovering it over the artifact. But if this temple collapses and the Chaquetrix is destroyed, how many others die? The queen's faceted eyes rotated rapidly, performing calculations. Millions, potentially billions depending on the cascading effects. Her voice contained new harmonics that Ben interpreted as reluctant admiration. You would risk yourself so readily. It's kind of what I do, Ben replied simply. Another violent tremor, and this time part of the ceiling collapsed, revealing the chaotic energies of the nebula beginning to breach the temple's barriers. Streaks of raw energy lashed through the opening like lightning, striking the floor dangerously close to where they stood. Whatever we're doing, it needs to be now, Ben urged. Lumina's internal lights pulsed in what appeared to be a decision-making pattern before stabilizing. The legends state that the Chaquetrix chooses its bearer. If it's synchronizing with your Omnitrix, perhaps you are meant to claim it. She stepped back, giving him space. I will attempt to stabilize the temporal field around us to minimize the initial energy discharge. Ben nodded gratefully, then turned his full attention to the hovering artifact. The Omnitrix was now pulsing rapidly, its familiar green glow intensifying with each beat. The Chaquetrix responded in kind, its swirling colors settling into a predominantly emerald pattern that matched the Omnitrix exactly. Taking a deep breath, Ben extended his left hand, the one not wearing the Omnitrix, and reached for the artifact. The moment his fingertips brushed the surface, the Chaquetrix liquefied, flowing up his arm like quicksilver. Ben gasped as sensation overwhelmed him, not pain, but an intensity beyond anything he'd experienced. The liquid crystal flowed across his torso before wrapping around his right arm, encasing the Omnitrix completely. For one heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the Omnitrix pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and on the 4th pulse, a blinding flash of emerald energy erupted from Ben's body. The shockwave rippled outward, tempora, Riley halting the temple's collapse as reality itself paused to acknowledge what had just occurred. When Ben could see again, the Chaquetrix had transformed. Rather than encasing the Omnitrix, it had merged with it, creating an intricate lattice of crystalline material that extended from the watch face halfway up his forearm. The original Omnitrix face remained visible, but now surrounded by an elaborate framework of shifting materials that pulsed with internal energy. That's new, Ben managed, staring at his transformed device. Lumina approached cautiously, her crystalline form casting prismatic light patterns across the chamber. Extraordinary. It appears that Chaquetrix has recognized the Omnitrix as compatible technology and integrated with it rather than replacing it. Ben flexed his arm experimentally. Despite its elaborate appearance, the merged devices felt no heavier than the Omnitrix alone, and the crystal components moved fluidly with his skin as if they were part of him. What exactly does the Chaquetrix do? He asked, noting how the temple's tremors had momentarily subsided. Before Lumina could answer, the newly merged device activated of its own accord. The familiar Omnitrix interface appeared as a hologram, but vastly expanded. Where Ben was accustomed to seeing his roster of alien transformations, he now witnessed an infinite spiral of DNA sequences extending into dimensions he could barely perceive. Oh, he breathed, understanding instantly and intuitively. It's a cosmic key. Lumina's internal lights flickered in surprise. Yes, that is one of its primary functions. How did you know? I can see it, Ben replied, watching the holographic display rotate. It's showing me connections. Pathways between realities. The Omnitrix lets me transform into different alien species. But the Chaquetrix is showing me how those species connect across different universes and dimensions. The temple shuddered again, more violently than before. This time, the momentary stability granted by the Chaquetrix's activation was fading rapidly. We need to leave, Lumina stated urgently, her voice resonating with alarm harmonics. The temple's dimensional anchors are failing completely. Ben nodded, deactivating the holographic display with a thought. My ship is docked at the upper level. Can you make it there? Lumina began, but was interrupted by a catastrophic collapse of the chamber's far wall. The nebula's energies poured in, raw cosmic forces that would disintegrate normal matter on contact. Acting on instinct, Ben raised his transformed arm. The merged Omnitrix Chaquetrix responded instantly, projecting a shield of emerald energy that deflected the incoming forces. The protection extended around Lumina as well, creating a bubble of stable space amid the chaos. That answers that question, Ben noted with grim humor. Let's move. They raced up the spiraling ramp, Ben maintaining the energy shield through sheer force of will. The temple was disintegrating around them, sections phasing in and out of reality as its dimensional anchors failed. Passages that Ben had navigated earlier now opened into empty void or twisted into impossible geometries. The temple's spatial configuration is collapsing, Lumina explained as they reached a junction Ben didn't recognize. The pathways are reconfiguring randomly. Ben's transformed device pulsed, and suddenly he could perceive more than just the physical structure around them. Overlaid on reality were patterns of energy, ley lines of force connecting different sections of the temple. This way, he said with unexpected confidence, choosing a corridor that appeared to lead nowhere but that his newfound perception showed connected to the upper levels. Lumina followed without hesitation, her crystalline form illuminating their path as the temple's ambient lighting failed. You can perceive the dimensional interfaces, she observed. The Chaquetrix is already integrating with your neural patterns. Is that good or bad? Ben asked as they rounded a corner to find a dead end. Unprecedented, Lumina answered simply. When Ben looked at her questioningly, she added. The Chaquetrix was thought to require extensive preparation before neural integration. The process normally takes years of conditioning. Ben approached the apparent dead end and, following his new perceptions, simply walked forward. The wall rippled like water and they passed through, emerging in a vast chamber Ben recognized as near his entry point. I've had the Omnitrix for 15 years. He explained as they navigated the increasingly unstable architecture. Maybe that counts as conditioning. Another violent tremor nearly threw them off their feet. Above, through a massive breach in the ceiling, Ben could see his ship still docked but listing dangerously as the platform it was attached to began to disintegrate. We need to hurry, he urged, projecting the energy shield wider to protect them from debris falling from above. They sprinted across the chamber, dodging collapsing columns and sections of floor that simply vanished into dimensional rifts. As they approached the exit, a massive crystalline support beam crashed down directly in their path. Without breaking stride, Lumina raised both hands. Her internal energies flared brilliantly, and the beam shattered into thousands of fragments that she telekinetically pushed aside, clearing their path. Impressive, Ben noted appreciatively. Basic crystalline manipulation, Lumina replied modestly, though her internal lights pulsed in what might have been pride. They reached the exterior platform just as it began to separate from the main structure. The gap between them and the ship widened to nearly 3 meters of empty space. With the chaotic energies of the nebula churning below. Can you make that jump? Ben asked, calculating the distance. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated, performing her own calculations. My density makes such leaps problematic, but Ben didn't wait for her to finish. He activated the Omnitrix component of his merge device, cycling through his transformation options before selecting one. Big chill, he announced as his body transformed into the moth-like necrophrygian form. The Chaquetrix component adapted instantly, its crystalline structure flowing seamlessly around his transformed arm. Now incorporating ice-blue elements that complemented his alien physiology. Without hesitation, he scooped up the crystalline queen, noting with surprise that despite her apparent density, she adjusted her mass to become manageable. Spreading his wings, he launched them across the gap, phasing both of them through the ship's hull directly into the cockpit. Once inside, he reverted to human form and immediately took the controls. Primus, emergency departure protocol. Get us clear of the nebula. The AI responded instantly, the engines flaring to life as the ship detached from the disintegrating platform. Behind them, the ancient temple was collapsing completely, sections disappearing into dimensional rifts while others exploded into cascading energy discharges. Structural integrity at 47%, Primus reported calmly. Calculating optimal escape vector. Ben piloted manually, weaving through the increasingly violent gravitational distortions of the nebula. The merged Omnitrix Chaquetrix pulsed on his wrist, and again he found he could perceive energy patterns invisible to normal senses, currents and eddies in the fabric of space that he instinctively understood how to navigate. Adjust heading to 174 Mark III, he instructed Primus, following a path that appeared stable to his enhanced perception. Lumina moved to stand beside him, her crystalline form adapting to the ship's artificial gravity. You can see the dimensional currents, she observed, not a question but a confirmation. Yeah, Ben acknowledged, not taking his eyes off the controls. It's like they were always there, but I never had the right eyes to see them before. The ship shuddered as a particularly violent distortion caught them, but Ben compensated instantly, following his newfound senses to guide them through. Behind them, the temple's final collapse created a shockwave of multidimensional energy that propelled them forward, accelerating their escape. Ben wrestled with the controls, keeping them on course as the forces threatened to tear the vessel apart. Hold on, he shouted as they approached the nebula's boundary, the barrier between the chaotic energies within and the relative calm of normal space. The ship broke through the barrier with a final, violent shudder, alarms blaring throughout the vessel as multiple systems reported damage. But they were clear, the peaceful black of space surrounding them as the nebula receded behind, its formerly beautiful colors now twisted into a maelstrom of destructive energy. Ben exhaled slowly, allowing the tension to drain from his shoulders. Primus, damage report, hull integrity at 68%. Propulsion systems operating at reduced efficiency. Life support stable, communication arrays non-functional. Overall status, damaged but operational, the AI responded. Could have been worse, Ben muttered, setting the ship on a stable course away from the nebula before finally turning to face his unexpected passenger. Lumina stood perfectly still, her crystalline form refracting the cockpit's lights into complex patterns across the walls. Her internal energies had settled into a steady rhythm, suggesting she had emerged from the crisis unharmed. So, Ben began, gesturing to the transformed device on his wrist, I believe you were about to explain what exactly the Chaquetrix does before the temple started collapsing around us. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated slowly, focusing on him with an intensity that would have been unnerving from most species. The Chaquetrix is many things. Benjamin Tennyson, a key to dimensional gateways, a repository of cosmic knowledge, a tool for manipulating fundamental forces. Her harmonics shifted to a more somber tone, and potentially, a weapon of incomprehensible power in the wrong hands. She gestured toward the nebula visible through the viewport, now a chaotic maelstrom of energy. What your witn? Essing is merely the first consequence of its activation. The Chaquetrix doesn't simply exist in this reality, it connects to all realities simultaneously. Its merger with your Omnitrix has created a focal point that will draw attention from across the multiverse. Attention, Ben repeated, suddenly wary. What kind of attention? Beings of great power who have searched for the Chaquetrix for millennia. Some, like my people, seek it for its knowledge. Others, she trailed off, her internal lights dimming momentarily. Others will seek to use it for conquest or destruction. Ben looked down at his transformed device, watching as energy patterns shifted beneath its surface. So basically, I've painted a target on myself. Not merely on yourself, Lumina corrected. On your entire universe. The activation of the Chaquetrix creates ripples across dimensional barriers. Those ripples will weaken the boundaries between realities, potentially allowing passage where none was possible before. Ben processed this information silently. After 15 years as a hero, he'd learned to take such revelations in stride. So we need to find a way to control these ripples before they tear reality apart. Lumina questioned, her tone suggesting surprise despite her alien vocal patterns. Well, I'm not going to figure this out on my own, Ben replied with a hint of his old grin. And you seem to know more about the Chaquetrix than anyone else I'm likely to find. Unless you'd prefer I drop you at the nearest spaceport. The crystalline queen's internal lights pulsed in what Ben was beginning to recognize as amusement. Your reputation for adaptability is well earned, Benjamin Tennyson. Most beings would be considerably more distressed by these circumstances. Call me Ben, he offered casually. And trust me, I'm plenty distressed. I've just had a lot of practice not showing it. The Omnitrix Chaquetrix suddenly pulsed with increased intensity, projecting a holograph display that expanded to fill the cockpit. Star charts materialized around them, but unlike any Ben had seen before. These showed not just the physical locations of stars and planets, but their dimensional coordinates as well. Layers upon layers of information mapping the connections between realities. Specific points pulsed with urgent light, 5 locations scattered across the galaxy, each emanating a distinct color signature. What am I looking at? Ben asked, though he already suspected the answer. Lumina moved through the holographic display, her crystalline form interacting with the light patterns in ways that adjusted and refined the projection. Focal points where the dimensional barriers are already weakening. The Chaquetrix is showing us where the convergence will begin. Convergence. When realities that were never meant to touch begin to overlap, Lumina explained, her voice resonating with concern. The consequences are unpredictable at best, catastrophic at worst. Ben studied the map, noting that one of the pulsing points corresponded to Earth's location. Let me guess, we need to visit each of these points to stabilize the dimensional barriers. That would be the logical approach. Lumina agreed. Though I should warn you, each of these locations falls within the territory of a different sovereign power. My influence extends only to the region showing blue resonance. Ben zoomed in on each location, committing them to memory. The Geohexian Empire, the Hydralian Depths, the Void Realms, and the Inferno Sanctum, he read from the map designations. I've had diplomatic contact with the Geohexians, but the others are equally ancient and powerful civilizations, Lumina finished. Each ruled by a queen with abilities comparable to my own, though manifesting differently according to their elemental affinities. More alien queens, Ben sighed, leaning back in his chair. Why is it never simple planetary dictators or hive minds? Lumina's crystalline features arranged themselves into what Ben interpreted as a smile. The universe seldom arranges itself according to our preferences, Ben Tennyson. The holographic display shifted, focusing on the nearest focal point, the crystalline world that Lumina ruled. Ben could see dimensional fractures already forming around it, thin lines of disruption that threatened to widen into full breaches. Your world is closest, he noted, and apparently already experiencing effects. Lumina nodded, her internal lights pulsing with concern. Stellara, my homeworld, possesses Nadu. Raw crystalline formations that resonate with dimensional energies. It would be among the first affected by the Chaquetrix's activation. She hesitated before adding, if you truly intend to address this crisis. Beginning there would be wise. Ben set the navigation coordinates, noticing how the Omnitrix Chaquetrix automatically supplied the precise dimensional coordinates that Primus would normally have difficulty calculating. Course set for Stellara, he confirmed. Primus, time to arrival. Approximately 17 hours at current maximum sustainable speed, the AI replied. Ben nodded, then turned back to Lumina. That gives us time to prepare. I need you to tell me everything you know about the Chaquetrix, these focal points, and especially the queens we're likely to encounter. The crystalline queen's faceted eyes rotated thoughtfully. A wise approach, though I should warn you, my knowledge of the other queens is limited. We do not interact frequently. Political tensions. Ben guessed. Familiar with interstellar diplomacy. You might say that, Lumina replied, her harmonics suggesting complexity beyond simple disagreement. Each of us controls fundamental forces that naturally oppose one another. Terrax of the Geohexians commands earth and gravity. Aquaria of the Hydralian depths controls water and fluidity. Nyx of the void realms harnesses darkness and dimensional energy. Pyrolus of the Inferno Sanctum wields fire and plasma. And you, light and crystalline structures, she answered simply. Together, we maintain a delicate balance across this sector of the galaxy. But that balance exists precisely because we remain separated. Ben processed this information, already formulating diplomatic approaches for each queen based on his extensive experience with interstellar negotiations. And now the Chaquetrix is forcing you together, he observed. I'm guessing that's going to create some tension. An understatement, Lumina confirmed. The last time all 5 queens gathered in one location was nearly 3,000 years ago. The resulting conflict created what your people now call the Horsehead Nebula. Ben whistled softly. That's going to complicate things. Indeed, Lumina's internal lights pulsed in a pattern suggesting resignation. However, the alternative is universal destruction. Even the most stubborn queen should recognize that priority. Should, yes, Ben agreed, well acquainted with how rarely rational priorities governed interspecies conflicts. But in my experience, that doesn't mean they will. The ship hummed steadily around them as it accelerated toward Stellara. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past as they entered hyperspace. The merged Omnitrix Chaquetrix continued to pulse gently on Ben's wrist, occasionally projecting small holographic fragments of information as if testing its new capabilities. Ben leaned forward, studying the crystalline queen with newfound curiosity. While we're traveling, why don't you tell me more about yourself? If we're going to be working together to prevent multiversal collapse, I should probably know more about my new ally. Lumina's internal lights shifted to patterns suggesting surprise. Then consideration. An unusual request. My species does not typically engage in personal disclosure with outsiders. Consider it diplomatic exchange, Ben suggested with a smile. I've found that understanding individuals makes navigating interstellar crises much easier. The crystalline queen was silent for a moment, her faceted eyes rotating slowly as she appeared to consider his proposal. Finally, her internal lights stabilized into a pattern suggesting acceptance. Very well, Ben Tennyson. What would you like to know? As the ship hurtled toward Stellara, Ben and Lumina began an exchange of histories, cultures, and personal experiences, the beginning of an alliance that would soon be tested against the forces of a fragmenting multiverse. Behind them, the nebula continued its chaotic transformation, a visible reminder of how quickly stability could dissolve into cosmic devastation. And throughout the galaxy, 4 other queens sudden L.Y. found their attention drawn to unexpected disturbances within their realms, each sensing a shift in fundamental forces that had remained balanced for millennia. The convergence had begun. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Kingdoms in Crisis. Stellara glittered against the void like a multifaceted jewel, its crystalline continents refracting starlight in prismatic displays visible even from orbit. Ben stood at the viewport, mesmerized by the planet's beauty. Unlike the solid landmasses of Earth, Stellara's geography consisted of massive crystalline structures that grew from a liquid core, forming continent-sized geometric patterns that seemed deliberately arranged despite their natural origin. Your world is beautiful, he said, turning to Lumina who stood beside him, her own crystalline form seeming more vibrant in proximity to her homeworld. Beauty and function in harmony, she replied, her internal lights pulsing with what Ben now recognized as pride. Each formation serves both aesthetic and practical purposes. The largest structures house our cities within their matrix, while the geometric arrangements channel planetary energies to power our civilization. The serenity of the moment shattered as Primus's voice cut through the observation. Detecting significant seismic disturbances across Stellara's northern hemisphere. Readings indicate dimensional instability affecting crystalline integrity at the planetary core. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated rapidly, alarm. That's impossible. Stellara's core has remained stable for millions of years. Ben's newly merged device pulsed on his wrist, projecting a holographic display that showed fracture lines spreading through Stellara's crystalline structure, invisible to normal sensors but painfully clear through the Chaquetrix's dimensional perception. The convergence is accelerating, Ben stated grimly. Primus, time to planetary entry. 17 minutes to established approach vector. Too long. Lumina's harmonic voice resonated with urgency. The primary stabilization matrix is located at the crystal spire. If it fails, the entire planetary network will collapse. Ben studied the holographic display, making a swift decision. We're not waiting for standard approach. Primus, take manual control of the ship and maintain position in high orbit. He turned to Lumina. I'm guessing you can survive in space. Briefly, she confirmed. My crystalline structure can maintain integrity in vacuum for approximately 20 minutes before requiring recalibration. That's all we need. Ben activated the Omnitrix component of his merged device, cycling through his transformation options before selecting one. Jetray. The transformation washed over him in emerald light. When it cleared, his amphibian form stood ready. The Chaquetrix component having once again adapted seamlessly to his alien physiology, now forming aerodynamic striations along his wings. I can get us down there faster than the ship, he explained. His voice now carrying the nasal quality characteristic of Jetray. Ready. Lumina's only response was to adjust her crystalline density, her form becoming lighter while maintaining structural integrity. Ben wrapped his arms around her waist, surprised at how perfectly her crystalline structure seemed to fit against his transformed body, almost as if the Chaquetrix was subtly Ada. Putting both of them for optimal compatibility. Primus, decompress the airlock on my mark, Ben instructed. 3, 2, 1, mark. The airlock cycled open, exposing them to the vacuum of space. Ben launched immediately, his amphibian form streaking toward the planet below with Lumina secured against him. The Chaquetrix enhancement allowed him to generate a partial energy shield around them both, protecting them from the worst effects of atmospheric entry. They plunged through Stellara's upper atmosphere, the shield around them glowing brilliantly as friction superheated the air. Below, the crystalline landscape rushed toward them with alarming speed. The crystal spire, Lumina directed, pointing toward a massive formation that towered above all others, a perfect helical structure. Spiraled upward from the planet's surface to pierce the lower atmosphere, its surface adorned with countless smaller crystals that formed intricate patterns. As they approached, Ben could see the dimensional fractures with his enhanced perception, cracks in reality spreading through the structure like fissures in glass, leaking energies that shouldn't exist in this universe. More alarmingly, he saw crystalline beings' evacuation in obvious panic, their light-based technology malfunctioning as dimensional energies interfered with normal operations. Ben angled their descent toward a large platform near the spire's apex. Where exactly is this stabilization matrix? The heart chamber, near the core, Lumina replied. We must. Her words cut off as a massive tremor shook the entire structure. Across the crystalline landscape, massive formations shattered, sending fragments cascading in catastrophic avalanches. The crystal spire itself twisted unnaturally, geometries deforming in ways that defied physical laws. That can't be good, Ben muttered, accelerating their descent. They landed on the platform just as another tremor hit. Ben immediately reverted to human form, instinctive. Lee knowing his natural state would better interface with the Omnitrix Chaquetrix for what came next. Crystalline citizens scattered around them, their translucent forms pulsing with panic as they evacuated deeper into the structure. Unlike Lumina, these beings appeared less humanoid, more abstract crystalline formations with minimal appendages, communicating through pulses of light rather than sound. My people are evacuating to the emergency shelters, Lumina explained, already moving toward a triangular entrance. This way, the heart chamber is accessed through the sovereign pathways. Ben followed. Noting how the crystalline architecture responded to Lumina's presence, doorways dilating open and internal pathways reconfiguring to provide the most direct route. Clearly, her status as Queen wasn't merely political but integrated into the very structure of their civilization. As they descended through the spire, Ben witnessed the full magnificence of Stellarian architecture. Vast chambers opened around them, their geometrically perfect proportions housing what appeared to be vast computational arrays constructed entirely from crystal. Light pulsed through transparent conduits, carrying both energy and information simultaneously. Crystalline beings moved with purpose, some acknowledging Lumina with formal light pulses that Ben interpreted as reverence. "Your citizens seem surprisingly calm given the circumstances," he observed as they passed through another chamber. "Appearance versus reality," Lumina replied, her internal lights pulsing in complex patterns. "They are experiencing extreme distress but maintain outward composure. Our species evolved to prioritize collective stability over individual expression during crises." Another violent tremor shook the structure, this one strong enough to crack the crystalline floor beneath their feet. Ben stumbled, catching himself against a wall that felt strangely warm and responsive to his touch. The Omnitrix Chaquetrix pulsed, and he suddenly perceived the entire spire as a living entity of sorts, a vast crystalline organism slowly dying as dimensional fractures corrupted its structure. "It's alive," he whispered in realization. Lumina glanced back, her faceted eyes rotating in surprise. "You can perceive the consciousness matrix. Impressive." "Yes, the crystal spire is semi-sentient, a symbiotic entity that is our civilization while we maintain its systems." They reached a chamber unlike any other they'd passed. Where most spaces featured geometric precision, this room contained what appeared to be a garden of crystal formations growing in seemingly random patterns. Colors shifted through the structures in hypnotic waves, creating an effect both beautiful and slightly disorienting. "A shortcut through the contemplation gardens," Lumina explained as they navigated between crystal formations. "The sovereign path lies beyond." As they crossed the garden, several crystal structures suddenly twisted toward them, their previously random patterns becoming distinctly predatory. Ben reacted instantly, pulling Lumina aside as a crystalline tendril lashed through the space she had occupied moments before. "The dimensional disruption is affecting the resonance patterns," Lumina explained, her voice taking on urgent harmonics. "The garden perceives us as contaminants." More crystal formations twisted toward them, sharp edges gleaming in the ambient light. Ben raised his transformed wrist, the Omnitrix Chaquetrix responding to his intention by projecting a shield similar to what he'd generated during atmospheric entry. "How much farther to the heart chamber?" he asked, deflecting another crystalline tendril with the energy shield. "Through the archway ahead," Lumina replied, her own hands glowing as she projected energy that temporarily calmed the nearest crystal formations. "But the sovereign path requires royal authentication too." Ben didn't wait for her to finish. Grabbing her crystalline hand, he pulled her into a sprint toward the archway as the entire garden came alive around them. Crystal formations erupted from the floor, walls twisted to block their path, and tendrils of living crystal whipped through the air with increasing aggression. They reached the archway just as the garden fully transformed into a death trap. The opening pulsed with verification patterns, scanning Lumina's crystalline signature before dilating to admit them. Ben dragged them both through as crystal spears impaled the space where they had stood, the doorway sealing instantly behind them. "That was," Lumina began, her harmonics suggesting both alarm and admiration. "Tuesday for me," Ben finished with a grim smile, already moving down the corridor ahead. "Which way now?" "The Pasa." They entered spiraled downward in a perfect helix, its walls inscribed with complex equations that pulsed with inner light. As they descended, Ben felt the Omnitrix Chaquetrix resonating with the surrounding architecture. Information transferring between them in ways he couldn't fully comprehend but instinctively understood were significant. "The knowledge walls," Lumina explained, noting his interest. "The complete mathematical history of our species encoded in crystalline lattices." Another tremor, stronger than any previous, shook the entire structure. Cracks spread across the knowledge walls, equations fragmenting as the crystal matrix failed. Ben's enhanced perception showed him dimensional energies pouring through these cracks, currents of alien physics invading this reality like antibodies attacking a foreign organism. We're running out of time, he observed grimly. They reached the bottom of the spiral to find a massive chamber that clearly served as the heart of the entire structure. A perfect geodesic sphere of pure crystal hung suspended in the center, pulsing with brilliant white light that emanated outward through transparent conduits to the entire spire. Around this central sphere, crystalline technicians worked frantically at control interfaces, their forms moving with increasing desperation as systems failed around them. One figure stood out among them, taller than the others, her crystalline form more elaborately structured and radiating authority. She turned as they entered, her faceted eyes focusing instantly on Lumina. "Sovereign," she acknowledged, her harmonic voice carrying tones of both respect and urgent concern. "The stabilization matrix is failing. Dimensional interference has corrupted 47% of primary systems." "Prime Architect," Lumina replied formally before switching to urgent mode. "This is Benjamin Tennyson of Earth, bearer of the Chaquetrix. He may be able to assist." The Prime Architect's faceted eyes rotated toward Ben, specifically focusing on his transformed device. The Chaquetrix, the artifact of legend. Her internal lights pulsed with what might have been skepticism. How would an organic being utilize such technology? Before either could respond, the central sphere's steady pulse faltered, its perfect white light suddenly fracturing into discordant colors. Crystalline technicians moved with increased urgency, their light-based communications taking on patterns Ben interpreted as panic. "Matrix integrity at 23%, one technician reported, their harmonic voice strained. "Cascading failure imminent." Ben stepped forward decisively. "What does the stabilization matrix actually do?" In simple terms, the Prime Architect's lights pulsed in what might have been indignation at the simplification. But Lumina answered directly. "It maintains dimensional stability for the entire planet. Stellara exists partially in multiple phase states simultaneously. The matrix keeps these states properly aligned." Ben nodded, studying the failing sphere with both normal and enhanced perception. Through the Chaquetrix's influence, he could see exactly how the dimensional frequencies were destabilizing, like instruments in an orchestra suddenly playing out of key. "I think I can help," he said, approaching the sphere despite the Prime Architect's gesture of warning. "The Chaquetrix seems designed to manipulate dimensional frequencies. Such intervention without proper calibration could accelerate the collapse," the Prime Architect warned. "Our calculations indicate," Annette, her violent tremor cut off her words as fractures spread across the chamber floor. The central sphere's light dimmed alarmingly, power fluctuations visible throughout its crystalline matrix. "We're out of time for calculations," Ben stated firmly. He turned to Lumina. "I need to interface directly with the matrix. Will your people allow that?" Lumina's internal lights pulsed in rapid communicati. On with the Prime Architect, a silent exchange that lasted only seconds before she turned back to Ben. "Yes, but be warned, the energies involved could overwhelm even the Omnitrix's safeguards." "Story of my life," Ben replied with a grim smile. He approached the central sphere, raising his transformed wrist. "Just tell me what to do." "Place your hand against the matrix surface," Lumina instructed, moving beside him. "I will attempt to moderate the energy flow, but the connection must come from you." Ben nodded, extending his hand toward the massive crystal sphere. The moment his palm touched its surface, the Omnitrix Chaquetrix flared with brilliant emerald light. Energy surged up his arm, not painful but overwhelming in its intensity, like trying to contain an ocean within a cup. Through the connection, Ben suddenly perceived the entire crystalline planet as a single, vast organism. He felt the dimensional fractures spreading throughout its structure like disease through a body, breach leaking vital energy into the void between realities. More alarmingly, he sensed something on the other side of these breaches, entities or forces pressing against the weakened barriers, seeking entry into this reality. Acting on instinct rather than calculation, Ben activated the transformation component of his device. Feedback. The transformation washed over him, converting his human form into the conductoid alien. Instantly, the energy flow changed. Instead of overwhelming him, it now channeled through his transformed body's natural energy manipulation capabilities, enhanced further by the Chaquetrix integration. Incredible, the Prime Architect's harmonic voice registered distantly as Ben began absorbing the chaotic dimensional energies, converting them into forms compatible with Stellara's natural frequency. With feedback's abilities augmented by the Chaquetrix, Ben could literally see the dimensional harmonics as colors and patterns. He began systematically realigning them, drawing excess energy through his body and feeding it back into the matrix in stabilized form. The process was intuitive yet exhausting, like conducting 1,000 orchestras simultaneously while translating between languages that shouldn't be compatible. Gradually, the violent tremors subsided. The central sphere's light stabilized, returning to its steady white pulse. Throughout the chamber, crystalline technicians reported improvements in system integrity, their light-based communications shifting from panic to cautious optimism. After several minutes of intense concentration, Ben finally stepped back from the sphere, reverting to his human form as exhaustion hit him. Lumina moved quickly to support him as his knees buckled. "You did it," she said, her harmonic voice contained in tones Ben hadn't heard before, something close to awe. "The matrix is stabilizing." Ben managed a tired smile. "Not fixed though, just stabilized temporarily." The Prime Architect approached, her crystalline form moving with the precise dignity of her station. "Confirmed. Your intervention has averted immediate catastrophic failure, but the underlying dimensional instabilities remain." Her faceted eyes rotated toward Lumina. "Sovereign, preliminary analysis indicates similar events occurring across neighboring systems." Lumina nodded, her internal lights pulsing with concern. "The convergence spreads. We must proceed to the next focal point immediately." She turned to Ben. "Can you travel?" Before Ben could answer, the Omnitrix Chaquetrix projected its holographic display without his conscious command. The star chart materialized around them, showing the 5 focal points they'd identified earlier. The point representing Stellara now pulsed with a steady blue light indicating temporary stabilization, while the next nearest point, corresponding to the Geohexian Empire, flashed with urgent red warnings. "Guess that answers where we're going next," Ben observed, studying the display. "The question is how soon." "The Geohexian Empire lies at the edge of the Obsidian sector," Lumina explained, concern evident in her harmonics. "Approximately 16 light-years from Stellara. That would require..." The Prime Architect began calculating. "Too long," Ben interrupted, feeling strength returning as the Omnitrix Chaquetrix seemed to be actively accelerating his recovery. "We need a faster way." The device on his wrist pulsed, projecting additional information onto the holographic display, dimensional coordinates overlaid on physical space, showing pathways between real IEs that could potentially serve as shortcuts. As that, Lumina's internal lights pulsed with surprise. "Dimensional transit vectors," the Prime Architect confirmed, her harmonic voice containing both scientific interest and apprehension. "Theoretical pathways through subspace that could reduce transit time to mere hours instead of days." Ben studied the projected pathways, somehow understanding their implications despite never having encountered such concepts before. "The Chaquetrix is showing us shortcuts through the dimensional barriers." He looked up at Lumina. "The same barriers are weakening and causing all these problems. Utilizing such pathways could potentially accelerate the destabilization," the Prime Architect warned. "Or," Lumina countered, her faceted eyes rotating thoughtfully, "properly navigated. They could allow us to reach the focal points quickly enough to implement stabilization protocols before catastrophic failure occurs." Ben stood straighter, fatigue giving way to determination. "Either way, we don't have much choice. Every moment we delay, the convergence spreads." He turned to the Prime Architect. "Can your people maintain stability here long enough for us to reach the other focal points?" The crystalline official's internal lights pulsed in what appeared to be complex calculations before she responded. "With the adjustments you've implemented, we can maintain planetary integrity for approximately 72 hours before requiring additional intervention. Then we have our timeline," Ben stated decisively. "We need to reach all 5 focal points and implement similar stabilization within that window." Lumina nodded in agreement. "The ship's engines were damaged during our escape from the temple. Can they be repaired quickly enough for dimensional transit?" The Prime Architect communicated briefly with other technicians before answering. "No." However, her internal lights pulsed in what Ben interpreted as reluctance. "There is an alternative. The Sovereign vessel was designed for interdimensional travel, though it has never been tested at such distances." Lumina's reaction was subtle but clear to Ben's now iced eye, surprise tinged with something like reverence. The Prism Arc. It has been completed. Its final calibrations were performed only last cycle, the Prime Architect confirmed. It awaits only the Sovereign's activation. Ben looked between them, sensing the significance of this exchange. I'm guessing this isn't just any ship. The Prism Arc is. Lumina seemed to search for adequate terms. A vessel of my own creation. Designed to navigate the spaces between realities. It incorporates technology derived from ancient knowledge that predates even my civilization. Another tremor, older than before but a reminder of their limited time, shook the chamber. Ben made a swift decision. Then that's our transport. How soon can we depart? Immediately, Lumina answered, turning to Or. D an exit different from the one they'd entered. The docking bay lies beneath the heart chamber. As they prepared to leave, the Prime Architect stepped forward. Sovereign, the High Council requests confirmation of your intent. You propose to leave Stellara during a planetary crisis, accompanied by an alien bearing forbidden technology, to make contact with. Her harmonics conveyed deep concern. With the other sovereigns, Lumina's crystalline form straightened, authority radiating from her every facet. I do not propose, Architect. I inform. The convergence threatens not merely Stellara but all reality. The ancient protocols are clear. When existential threats emerge, the sovereigns must act, regardless of past conflicts. The Prime Architect's internal lights dimmed in what appeared to be resignation. As you command, Sovereign, the Council will maintain stability in your absence. With formalities concluded, Lumina led Ben through a series of crystal corridors that descended deeper into the structure. As they moved, Ben noticed the architecture becoming more ancient in appearance, less refined, more primal in its geometric patterns. Your Prime Architect seemed concerned about meeting the other queens. Ben observed as they descended. Lumina's internal lights pulsed in complex patterns before she responded. The 5 sovereign realms maintain separation for good reason. Our fundamental natures conflict on both physical and philosophical levels. Yet you're all queens, Ben pointed out. That suggests some commonality in how your civilizations developed. AAC. Convergence of necessity rather than choice, Lumina explained. Each realm controls essential aspects of cosmic balance: light, earth, water, void, and fire. Without sophisticated governance systems, His forces would have destabilized eons ago. They reached a massive chamber unlike any they'd passed through before, where the upper levels of the crystal spire featured refined, precise architecture. This ancient vault contained raw crystal formations that seemed to have grown naturally over millennia. The chamber expanded around them, revealing its true scale, large enough to house a significant vessel. And there it waited. The Prism Arc hung suspended in a cradle of pure energy, its design unlike any spacecraft Ben had encountered. Rather than a conventional hull, it appeared composed of interlocked crystal panels arranged in a configuration that seemed to shift slightly whenever viewed from different angles. Its overall shape suggested an elongated diamond with facets that caught light and refracted it in impossible patterns. No visible engines or propulsion systems were apparent, yet Ben sensed enormous potential energy contained within its structure. That, he stated with sincere admiration, is a beautiful ship. Quote, Lumina's internal lights pulsed with unmistakable pride. 3 centuries of design and construction. It incorporates principles from 12 different scientific disciplines, half of which have no equivalent in Earth terminology. They approached the vessel, crystal pathways forming beneath their feet to create a bridge to the entry point. As they neared, a section of the hull reconfigured itself, panels sliding apart to reveal an entrance that pulsed with welcoming light. The interior proved even more remarkable than the exterior. Instead of conventional corridors and compartments, the ship consisted of interconnected crystalline chambers that seemed to exist in slightly different phase states simultaneously. Light flowed through transparent conduits like blood through veins, carrying both energy and information throughout the vessel. The control center, Lumina directed, leading Ben to what appeared to be the heart of the ship. The bridge defied conventional design. Rather than stations with physical controls, it featured a central crystalline platform surrounded by floating geometric shapes that pulsed with inner light. No seats or accommodations for physical comfort were apparent, clearly designed for beings who didn't share human physiological needs. I'm guessing the ergonomics weren't designed with humans in mind, Ben observed with dry humor. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated in what Ben now recognized as her version of amusement. The prism arc adapts to its occupants. She gestured toward the central platform. It will recognize your presence momentarily. As if on cue, a section of the crystal floor flowed upward, reforming into a structure remarkably similar to an earth chair, perfectly proportioned for human anatomy. Similar adaptations occurred throughout the chamber, creating interfaces compatible with Ben's physiology alongside the crystalline controls clearly designed for Lumina's species. Okay, that's impressive, Ben acknowledged, testing the crystalline seat and finding it surprisingly comfortable. How do we control it? Lumina stepped onto the central platform, her crystalline form immediately connecting with the ship's systems. The prism arc responds primarily to thought and intention, filtered through crystalline resonance. Her internal lights pulsed in complex patterns, and throughout the vessel. Systems activated in response. For you, the interface will likely manifest through your merged device. True to her prediction, the Omnitrix Chaquetrix pulsed with energy, projecting a holographic interface that showed ship systems in terms Ben could comprehend. Through this connection, he sensed the vessel's capabilities, far beyond what its size would suggest possible. This ship doesn't just travel through space. He realized aloud, it's designed to move between dimensions. Precisely, Lumina confirmed as the vessel hummed to life around them. Conventional space travel is merely its secondary function. Its primary purpose is navigation through the dimensional interfaces that separate realities. The crystalline walls around them became transparent, offering a panoramic view of the docking chamber. Energy built within the ship's core, not the controlled fury of conventional engines but something more subtle and infinitely more powerful. Ben felt it resonating with the Chaquetrix component of his device, two technologies designed on similar principles recognizing each other. Preparing for departure, Lumina announced, her hands moving through crystalline controls that responded to her touch like living things. The dimensional coordinates for the Geohexian Empire are being calculated. Ben watched in fascination as the holographic display showed their land route, not a straight line through space but a complex path that weaved between dimensional barriers, utilizing natural weaknesses to create shortcuts impossible for conventional travel. Transit time, he asked. Approximately 4 hours, Lumina replied. Though subjective experience may vary, dimensional transit sometimes affects temporal perception. The prism arc lifted from its energy cradle, the crystal panels of its hull reorienting themselves into flight configuration. Throughout the vessel, systems locked into alignment, creating harmonic resonances that Ben felt rather than heard. Departure sequence initiated, Lumina stated, her internal lights pulsing in rhythm with the ship's energies. The chamber wall before them dilated open, revealing not the interior of the Cr. Eastal spire but a direct passage to open sky. The prism arc glided forward, accelerating smoothly as it emerged from its ancient berth into Stellara's crystalline atmosphere. Ben watched through the transparent walls as the magnificent crystal landscapes of Lumina's homeworld spread beneath them. Despite the recent crisis, the planet retained its breathtaking beauty, continent-sized geometric patterns glittering in the light of a blue-white star. Your world is amazing, he said sincerely. We'll find a way to protect it. Lumina's internal lights pulsed with what might have been gratitude, though her focus remained on navigating their departure. The prism arc ascended rapidly, Stellara's crystalline surface receding beneath them as they approached the upper atmosphere. Preparing for dimensional transit, she announced, her harmonic voice taking on new resonances as she connected more deeply with the ship's systems. The Chaquetrix's presence should stabilize our passage, but the experience may be disorienting. Ben had just enough time to brace himself before reality seemed to fold around them. The starfield visible through the ship's transparent hull suddenly twisted, Santa Rs elongating into streams of light that bent in impossible directions. Colors shifted beyond the visible spectrum, sometimes appearing as textures or sounds rather than visual phenomena. The sensati lasted only moments before reality reasserted itself, but the view outside had completely changed. Instead of Stellara's star system, they now traveled through what appeared to be a tunnel of crystalline energy. Its walls flowing with patterns similar to those within the Chaquetrix. Welcome to interdimensional space, Lumina stated, her harmonics suggesting satisfaction with the successful transition. This passage exists between conventional realities, a boundary layer where physical laws become negotiable. Ben studied the crystalline tunnel through both normal and enhanced perception. To his eyes, it appeared as a stable passage, but the Chaquetrix showed him the true complexity, countless realities pressing against this narrow corridor, separated by barriers thinner than thought. It's beautiful, he acknowledged. And terrifying. One rupture in these walls would be catastrophic, Lumina confirmed. Which is why navigation requires precise calculations. Fortunately, the Prism arc was designed specifically for this environment. As they traveled, Ben noted how the ship's crystalline structure seemed perfectly attuned to their surroundings, almost as if it had been grown rather than built. Developed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of interdimensional space. So, he began, settling into the crystal seat that had formed for him. While we have a few hours, maybe you can tell me more about these other queens we're about to meet. Starting with the Geohexians, Lumina's internal lights pulsed in what Ben interpreted as consideration. Chaquetrix of the Geohexian Empire is complicated. Her species evolved in environments humans would consider extreme, gravity 18 times Earth standard, temperatures fluctuating between freezing and volcanic within single diurnal cycles. Sounds pleasant, Ben remarked dryly. It produced a resilient species, Lumina continued. Geohexians are silicon-based life forms with crystalline internal structures not entirely unlike my own people, though far denser and designed for physical power rather than energy manipulation. The ship's holographic systems responded to their conversation, displaying an image of a Geohexian, a massive, roughly humanoid being with a body composed of interlocked hexagonal plates that appeared metallic but were clearly biological in nature. The figure stood nearly 9 feet tall, with proportions suggesting immense physical strength and a center of gravity optimized for stability in extreme conditions. They look formidable, Ben observed. They are, Lumina confirmed. A Geohexian warrior can withstand direct energy weapons that would vaporize most organic beings. Their civilization evolved around concepts of honor, strength, and endurance, values reflected in their social structures and governance. Quote, and Chaquetrix herself. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated thoughtfully. Queen Chaquetrix is not what one might expect from a species with such a martial history. She gained the throne through their traditional combat trials, yes, but her rule has been marked by significant reforms. Where previous Geohexian monarchs expanded through conquest, Chaquetrix has focused on internal development and limited diplomatic engagement. That sounds promising, Ben noted optimistically. Perhaps, Lumina's harmonics suggested caution. However, her reforms have not been universally welcomed. Traditional factions within the empire consider her policies too progressive, while some neighboring systems remain suspicious of Geohexian intentions regardless of apparent changes. Ben nodded, familiar with the complexities of interstellar politics. And your relationship with her? Professional, Lumina replied with diplomatic precision. We have established limited agreements but maintain minimal direct contact. Our civilizations, fundamental natures, crystalline light versus silicon earth, create natural tensions that require careful management. Before Ben could inquire further, the ship's systems suddenly flared with warning signals. Throughout the vessel, crystal conduits pulsed with urgent patterns as external sensors detected anomalies in the dimensional passage. What's happening? Ben asked, instantly alert. Lumina's hands moved rapidly through the crystalline controls, her internal lights pulsing with concern. Dimensional fluctuations ahead, far stronger than anticipated. The passage is destabilizing. Through the transparent hull, Ben saw the crystalline tunnel wavering, its previously smooth walls developing ripples that suggested imminent failure. Beyond these ripples, he glimpsed fragments of other realities, alien landscapes, impossible geometries, entities that shouldn't exist in physical space. Can we navigate around them? He asked, the Omnitrix Chaquetrix component on his wrist pulsing in response to the dimensional disturbances. Negative, Lumina replied, her voice taking on harmonics of concentration. The fluctuations span the entire passage width. We must either return to normal space immediately or attempt to stabilize our transit path. Ben studied the holographic displays, noting their position relative to their destination. We're closer to the Geohexian Empire than Stellara now, right? Correct. Approximately 63% of our journey is complete. Decision made, Ben activated his merge device, cycling through options before finding what he sought. Let me try something. Alien X might be able to. No. Lumina's interruption came with surprising force, her harmonic voice resonating with alarm. A celestial sapien transformation within interdimensional space could have catastrophic consequences. Their reality-altering abilities would interact unpredictably with the already unstable boundaries. Ben paused, hand hovering over the Omnitrix dial. Good to know. Alternative suggestions. Lumina's faceted eyes rotated rapidly, calculating options. The prism arc can generate a stabilization field, but it requires additional energy input specifically attuned to the dimensional frequencies we're encountering. Understanding immediately, Ben cycled to a different transformation. Chromastone. The transformation washed over him, converting his human form into the crystalline crystal sapien. The Chaquetrix component adapted instantly, its structure flowing seamlessly into C. Chromastone's crystalline body and enhancing its natural energy manipulation abilities. Perfect selection, Lumina acknowledged, her hands configuring the ship's systems to interface with his transformed state. Crystal sapien energy manipulation will complement the arc's stabilization fields. Channel your energy through the central resonator. A crystalline structure rose from the floor beside Ben, its configuration clearly designed as an energy interface. He placed his hands on it, feeling an immediate connection form between his transformed body, the ship's systems, and the dimensional passage surrounding them. Through this connection, Ben perceived the true nature of their predicament. The dimensional boundaries weren't simply weakening, they were being deliberately eroded by forces F. Rom, another reality attempting to break through. He sensed intelligence behind the disruption, not random decay but calculated interference. Something's trying to get in, he stated, channeling energy. Why through his crystalline form to counter the external pressure? These aren't natural fluctuations. Lumina's internal lights pulsed with alarm. Confirmed. Sensor analysis indicates organized energy. Why patterns consistent with directed intention rather than entropic decay? Working together, they established a stabilization field that extended beyond the ship's hull, reinforcing the dimensional passage around them. Ben absorbed the chaotic energies attempting to breach their reality, converted them through his crystal sapien abilities, then channeled them back as reinforcement for the weakened barriers. The process required intense concentration, especially as the external forces seemed to adapt to their countermeasures, shifting attack vectors whenever one approach was successfully blocked. It became a complex battle of energy manipulation, action and reaction on a scale that transcended conventional physics. After several minutes of this invisible combat, the external pressure suddenly ceased. The dimensional passage stabilized, its crystalline walls returning to their previous smooth configuration. They've withdrawn, Lumina noted, her harmonic voice containing both relief and suspicion. Those sensors indicate they remain present beyond the dimensional boundary. Ben reverted to human form, the exertion of the energy manipulation leaving him temporarily drained despite the Omnitrix Chaquetrix's assistance in recovery. Any idea what they are? Insufficient data for definitive identification, Lumina replied. However, energy signatures suggest entities from Wa-Chi my people call the negative spectrum, beings of anti-energy that exist in opposition to conventional matter. Hostile? Ben asked, though he already suspected the answer. Invariably, Lumina confirmed. The ancient records describe multiple attempts by negative spectrum entities to breach our reality. Each incursion resulted in catastrophic destruction before being contained. Ben processed this information grimly. So the dimensional weakening isn't just causing natural disasters, it's opening doors for potential invaders. A logical conclusion, Lumina agreed, her faceted eyes rotating with concern. The convergence may be serving multiple purposes, not all of them random. This new complication weighed heavily as they continued their journey. The prism arc accelerated through the now stable dimensional passage, crystalline systems monitoring constantly for further intrusions. Ben used the time to study the holographic information about their destination, familiarizing himself with what little was known about Geohexian culture and protocols. Approximately 3 hours after their departure from Stellara, Lumina announced their approach to the transition point. Preparing for re-emergence into conventional space. Dimensional barrier integrity at this junction appears compromised but navigable. Ben watched as the crystalline tunnel around them began to thin, its walls becoming increasingly transparent. Through these thinning barriers, he glimpsed their destination, a massive planet that appeared to be composed entirely of geometric stone formations, its surface an twerk of perfect hexagonal patterns that extended from pole to pole. The Geohexian throne world, Lumina identified. Known in their language as Hexern Prime, though most galactic databases refer to it as the Stone Forge. The dimensional barrier parted before them like a curtain being drawn aside, and the prism arc emerged into conventional space. The transition was smoother than their entry had been, reality settling around them with only minor distortions that quickly faded. What didn't fade was Ben's immediate sense that something was very wrong with the Geohexian homeworld. From orbit, he could see massive fractures spreading across the planet's geometric surface, not the dimensional fractures visible only through the Chaquetrix's perception, but physical ruptures large enough to be visible from space. Entire continental plates appeared to be shifting, the perfect hexagonal patterns breaking apart like a shattered mosaic. That doesn't look good, Ben stated unnecessarily. Amina's internal lights pulsed with concern as she directed the ship's sensors toward the planet. Catastrophic tectonic activity detected across 87% of the planetary surface. Geother. MAL readings indicate core instability approaching critical levels. The convergence is affecting their planetary core. Ben asked, studying the sensor readings. Yes, but differently than on Stellara, Lumina replied. Where my world experienced dimensional fracturing at the crystalline matrix level, Hexern appears to be suffering physical disintegration. The planet's silicon-based crust is literally tearing apart. Before they could discuss further, the ship's communication systems activated, projecting a holographic image in the center of the bridge. The figure that appeared was unmistakably Geohexian, a massive being composed of interlocking hexagonal plates that shifted and reconfigured as it moved. Unlike the generic image Ben had seen earlier, this individual's plates were adorned with intricate engravings that glowed with inner light, suggesting rank or status. Unidentified vessel, the Geohexian's voice rumbled like stones grinding together, deep and resonant. You have entered Imperial space without authorization during planetary emergency protocols. Identify immediately or face defensive response. Lumina stepped forward, her crystalline form straight and formal. This is Sovereign Lumina of the Stellara Crystallis Collective, aboard the diplomatic vessel Prism Arc. We come in response to the convergence crisis affecting multiple worlds. The Geohexian's hexagonal plates shifted in what might have been surprise. Sovereign Lumina, your presence is unexpected. The massive figure seemed to reconsider its approach. Our sensors detect unusual dimensional transit signatures and energy patterns inconsistent with known Stellarian technology. Ben stepped into view beside Lumina. I can explain that part. I'm Ben Tennyson, Magister rank plumber and current bearer of the Chaquetrix. The effect of his introduction was immediate and dramatic. The Geohexian's entire form reconfigured, plates shifting into what Ben interpreted as a defensive posture. Tennyson. The figure rumbled. Your reputation precedes you, and you claim to bear the Chaquetrix, the mythical key to the dimensional gateways. Skepticism radiated from every syllable. Ben raised his arm, showing the transformed device. Not a claim, a fact, and right now, it might be your planet's only hope of survival. A tense silence followed as the Geohexian studied them through the communication link. Finally, its plates shifted again, settling into a more neutral configuration. I am Commander Lithos of the Imperial Guard. Given the current planetary crisis and the unusual nature of your arrival, I will escort you to the throne citadel. The commander's tone remained wary but pragmatic. Queen Terrax will determine the appropriate response to your presence. Thank you, Commander, Lumina replied formally. We seek only to assist. The convergence threatens all our realms equally. Lithos made a gesture that might have been acknowledgement. Transmitting approach vectors now. Follow precisely. Our defense systems remain active despite the planetary disruptions. The communication ended, and moments later, a squadron of Geohexian vessels appeared from behind a nearby moon. Their design reflected their creator's nature, massive ships composed of interlocking geometric sections that appeared carved from solid stone, though Ben suspected far more sophisticated technology lay beneath their primitive appearance. Escort formation, Lumina noted as the Geohexian ships positioned themselves around the Prism Arc. Though positioned equally for defense as for guidance. Can't blame them for being cautious, Ben observed. We did just appear out of nowhere claiming to have legendary artifacts. The Prism Arc followed its escort toward the planet's surface, entering the atmosphere along a carefully calculated trajectory that avoided the worst of the tectonic disruptions. As they descended, Ben witnessed the true scale of the catastrophe afflicting the Geohexian homeworld. Entire mountain ranges were collapsing as hexagonal plates that had remained stable for millennia suddenly shifted. Massive fissures opened across once perfect geometric planes, releasing superheated gases from the planet's destabilizing core. In the distance, what appeared to be cities carved directly from massive stone formations were being evacuated, tiny figures streaming away from collapsing structures. Their entire world is coming apart, Ben said softly. The convergence is affecting different worlds according to their fundamental nature, Lumina explained. For a silicon-based civilization built on stability and structural integrity, this is about as bad as it gets, Ben finished grimly. Their descent continued, bringing them to what appeared to be the single most stable region remaining on the planet's surface, a massive plateau formed from interlocked hexagonal columns that rose above the surrounding chaos. Atop this plateau stood the throne citadel, a monumental structure that seemed to have been carved from a single massive gemstone, its facets reflecting the planet's harsh sunlight in blinding patterns. The Prism Arc landed on a designated platform alongside their escort vessels. Through the ship's transparent hull, Ben could see Geohexian troops assembled in perfect geometric formations, their silicon bodies adorned with what appeared to be ceremonial armor despite the emergency conditions. Formal reception, Ben noted with surprise. Protocol matters deeply to Geohexians, Lumina explained as she prepared for disembarkation. Especially during crises, it represents control amid chaos. The ship configured an exit appropriate for both their physiologies, crystal panels flowing aside to create an opening. As they emerged onto the landing platform, Ben immediately felt the difference in gravity, nearly twice Earth standard, though manageable with his enhanced physiology. Commander Lithos approached, even more imposing in person than via hologram. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, the Geohexian's body consisted of interlocking hexagonal plates of what appeared to be polished granite shot through with veins of glowing metal. SA plates shifted subtly with each movement, reconfiguring to optimize functionality while maintaining perfect geometric alignment. Sovereign Lumina, Lithos acknowledged with a formal inclination of his massive head. His attention then shifted to Ben, faceted eyes narrowing. And Benjamin Tennyson, Queen Terax awaits you in the stability chamber. Recent tremors have necessitated her direct intervention in the planetary core stabilization efforts. As if to emphasize this point, a violent tremor shook the entire plateau, causing even the massive Geohexians to shift their stance for balance. Ben noticed hairline cracks spreading across the landing platform, tiny but telling signs of the catastrophic forces at work beneath the surface. We should hurry, Ben suggested, the Omnitrix Chaquetrix pulsing on his wrist as it detected the dimensional instabilities underlying the physical damage. Lithos led them from the landing platform into the throne citadel itself. The interior proved even more impressive than the exterior, vast chambers with ceilings that soared hundreds of feet overhead, their perfect geometric patterns creating acoustic properties that carried every sound with crystalline clarity. Despite the planetary crisis, the citadel hummed with organized activity, Geohexian officials moving with purpose rather than panic. They descended through multiple levels, each more ancient than the last. The architecture shifted from refined geometric precision to more primal, raw formations that suggested the earliest days of Geohexian civilization. The deeper they went, the more Ben felt the Omnitrix Chaquetrix responding to something, a resonance that grew stronger with each level they descended. The stability chamber lies at the heart of the planet's primary tectonic junction. Lithos explained as they entered a massive elevator carved from a single crystal shaft. From there, the Queen channels her connection to the planetary core to maintain structural integrity during normal fluctuation periods. But these aren't normal fluctuations, Ben observed. Lithos's plates shifted in what might have been the equivalent of a grim nod. No, they began 17 rotations ago and have increased exponentially in both frequency and magnitude. Our scientists are at a loss to explain the phenomenon. The elevator descended rapidly, carrying them deep beneath the surface. After several minutes of continuous descent, they finally emerged into a chamber unlike anything Ben had seen on the surface, where the upper levels featured refined geometric architecture. This ancient vault was a natural formation, a massive cavern whose walls consisted of perfect hexagonal columns that appeared to have grown rather than been constructed. At the center of this cavern stood a circular platform of polished black stone, surrounded by concentric rings of what appeared to be liquid metal that flowed in complex patterns. And upon this platform stood Queen Chaquetrix. Ben's first impression was of sheer physical presence. Where Commander Lithos was imposing, Queen Chaquetrix was monumental, a silicon titan standing nearly 12 feet tall, her body composed of interlocking hexagonal plates that seemed to contain the very essence of stone itself. Unlike other geohexians, whose plates were uniform in color, Chaquetrix's body incorporated multiple mineral types: obsidian, granite, emerald, ruby, and diamond, all seamlessly integrated into her form. Most striking were the veins of what appeared to be pure energy that flowed between her plates, pulsing in rhythm with the planet's heartbeat. Her face was a masterpiece of crystalline arrangement, features hewn with geometric precision yet possessing an undeniable regularity that transcended her alien appearance. Currently, his impressive figure stood with arms outstretched, energy flowing from her body into the platform beneath her feet and spreading outward through the concentric rings. Even from a distance, Ben could see the tremendous effort this required, the strain evident in how her plates shifted and locked as she channeled power directly into the planet's core. Commander Lithos halted at a respectful distance. "My queen, I present Sovereign Lumina of Stellara and Benjamin Tennyson of Earth, bearer of the Chaquetrix." They claim knowledge of the current crisis. For several long moments, Chaquetrix gave no indication she had heard, her focus entirely on the stabilization effort. Then, with deliberate control, she withdrew her energy from the platform. The concentric rings continued their flow, but their turns became more erratic without her direct guidance. When she finally turned to face them, her movement was like a mountain shifting, deliberate, powerful, inevitable. Her eyes were faceted gemstones that seemed to contain entire galaxies within their depths, focusing first on Lumina, then on Ben with piercing intensity. "Sovereign Lumina," Chaquetrix's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder, deep yet precise. "Ages have passed since a Stellarian sovereign entered the heart of Hexern." Her attention shifted fully to Ben and Benjamin Tennyson, the human whose name echoes across 12 sectors. Her faceted eyes narrowed. "You claim to bear the Chaquetrix." It wasn't a question, but Ben answered regardless, raising his transformed wrist. "I do. It merged with my Omnitrix during an incident at an ancient temple." "Show me," Chaquetrix commanded, not moving from her position at the center of the platform. Ben approached, ascending the steps to the raised platform where the Geohexian queen stood. Up close, her size was even more impressive. He barely reached the middle of her torso. The Omnitrix Chaquetrix pulsed stronger in her presence, responding to something in her silicon-based physiology. He extended his arm, displaying the transformed device. "It's been showing us focal points across the galaxy where dimensional barriers are weakening. Your world is one of them." Chaquetrix extended one massive hand, not touching the device but holding her palm near it. The energy veins within her silicon body pulsed in response to the Chaquetrix's emissions. After a moment of this silent communion, she withdrew her hand. "The legends speak truth," she acknowledged, her tone shifting subtly. "The key of worlds has returned in our time of greatest need." She turned toward Lumina. "You were right to bring him here, Sovereign of Light." Lumina ascended the platform to join them, her crystalline form appearing delicate beside Chaquetrix's massive silicon body, yet radiating its own undeniable power. "The convergence affects all our realms, Queen of Stone." Stellara suffered similar, if different, manifestations. Chaquetrix's plates shifted in what Ben was beginning to recognize as a geohexian expression of grave concern. Then it has truly begun. The great sundering that the ancients foretold. A violent tremor shook the chamber, more powerful than any previous. Cracks spread across the cavern floor, and several of the hexagonal columns supporting the ceiling fractured. Without hesitation, Chaquetrix raised both hands, energy flowing from her body to reinforce the damaged structures, forcing the stone back into proper alignment through sheer will. "Your world is becoming unstable at the atomic level," Ben observed, the Chaquetrix component giving him perception far beyond normal human senses. The dimensional disruption is affecting the fundamental forces binding silicon molecules together. Yes, Chaquetrix confirmed grimly. Our scientists detected the molecular destabilization 3 days ago. At current progression rates, total planetary structural failure will occur within 26 hours. The implications were staggering, not simply earthquakes and volcanic activity, but the literal disintegration of an entire world as the forces binding matter failed. I may be able to help, Ben offered, studying the concentric rings surrounding the platform. On Stellara, I was able to temporarily stabilize their crystalline matrix. Chaquetrix's faceted eyes studied him with new interest. The stability chamber connects directly to Hexern's core. It was designed to allow the ruling monarch to channel their inherent connection to stone into the planetary matrix. But the current disruptions exceed even my capacity to contain. Another tremor, stronger still. Throughout the chamber, support columns cracked and shifted. Geohexian technicians worked frantically at control interfaces, their movements becoming increasingly urgent as systems failed around them. Core temperature increasing beyond sustainable levels, one technician reported, voice like grinding stone. Molecular cohesion failing in sectors 17 through 31. Estimate complete structural collapse of affected regions within 2 hours. Chaquetrix turned to Ben, her massive form radiating both power and, surprisingly, desperation. Tennyson, if you can truly help, now is the time. My people are evacuating critical regions, but millions remain in danger. Our world is dying beneath our feet. Ben nodded, already activating the Omnitrix component of his transformed device. I'll need to transform into something that can interface with your planet's silicon-based structure. He cycled through options, considering and discarding possibilities before settling on one. Diamond Head. The transformation washed over him, converting his human form into the crystalline Petrosapian. As with previous transformations, the Chaquetrix component adapted seamlessly, integrating with Diamond Head's crystalline structure and enhancing its natural abilities. A Petrosapian form, Chaquetrix observed with interest. Appropriate choice. Their crystalline silicon structure shares Nance patterns with Geohexian physiology. Ben approached the central point of the platform where Chaquetrix had stood earlier. What do I do? Place your hands upon the convergence point, Chaquetrix instructed, moving beside him. I will guide your energy into the planetary matrix. The combined resonance of your Petrosapian form, the Chaquetrix, and my connection to the core may be sufficient to stabilize the critical junctions. Ben placed his crystalline hands on the indicated spot, a perfect hexagonal depression at the exact center of the platform. The moment contact was made, energy surged through his transformed body. The sensation was overwhelming but not painful, like suddenly becoming aware of an entire planet's nervous system, feeling every tremor and shift as if it were occurring within his own body. Through this connection, Ben perceived the true scale of the crisis. Hexern's core had become unstable at the quantum level, fundamental forces fluctuating in patterns that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality within the planet. More alarmingly, he sensed the same intelligent presence he'd detected in the dimensional passage, entities pushing against weakened barriers, seeking entry into this reality through the destabilized planetary core. Chaquetrix placed her massive hands beside his, her energy flowing into the system alongside his own. The difference in their PP Roach was immediately apparent. Where Ben's Petrosapian Chaquetrix energy worked at the quantum level to realign dimensional frequencies, Chaquetrix's power focused on physical reinforcement, literally holding the planet together through force of will. I can sense them, Chaquetrix growled, her voice strained with effort. Entities beyond the barrier, pushing to break through. I felt them during our journey here, Ben confirmed, channeling more energy into the stabilization effort. Something intelligent is using the convergence to create breaches. Lumina joined them, placing her crystalline hands on a different section of the platform. Her light-based energy provided a third harmonic to their efforts, creating a balanced triad of forces working in concert: earth, light, and the dimensional manipulation of the Chaquetrix. Through their combined efforts, the violent tremors began to subside. Throughout the chamber, monitoring systems showed decreasing instability as critical junctions Herohout the planet responded to their intervention. The concentric rings surrounding the platform flowed with renewed purpose, carrying their stabilizing energy throughout Hexern's structure. After nearly 20 minutes of intense concentration, Ben finally withdrew his hands from the platform, the immediate crisis temporarily averted. He reverted to human form, the exertion leaving him momentarily lightheaded despite the Omnitrix Chaquetrix's support. Chaquetrix straightened to her full imposing height, her faceted eyes studying Ben with newfound respect. "You have bought my world precious time, Benjamin Tennyson. The core stabilization will hold for perhaps 3 days before requiring renewal." "That should be enough," Ben replied, studying the holographic display that the Omnitrix Chaquetrix projected without his conscious command. "We need to reach the remaining focal points before the convergence progresses beyond containment." "The remaining focal points?" Chaquetrix questioned, her tone suggesting she already suspected the answer. Lumina nodded, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light. "The Hydralian depths, the Void realms, the Inferno Sanctum, the domains of Aquaria, Nyx, and Pyralus." Chaquetrix rumbled, her plates shifting in what Ben interpreted as deep concern. "You propose to unite the 5 sovereign powers." "Not by choice," Ben clarified. "The convergence is affecting all 5 realms simultaneously. Each focal point must be stabilized, or the dimensional barriers will collapse completely." Chaquetrix was silent for a long moment, her massive form perfectly still as she considered the implications. When she finally spoke, her tone had shifted subtly, resignation mingled with grim determination. "Then I must accompany you," she stated simply. "If Hexern's fate is bound to this convergence, I cannot remain while others determine its outcome." Ben exchanged glances with Lumina, recognizing both the opportunity and complication this presented. Having 2 queens allied with their cause would significantly strengthen their position when approaching the others, but managing the historical tensions between them would require careful diplomacy. "Your knowledge of silicon-based stabilization techniques would be invaluable," Ben acknowledged diplomatically. "But what about your people? Your planet?" Chaquetrix gestured toward the chamber around them, where geohexian technicians continued monitoring the stabilization systems. "Commander Lithos will oversee evacuation of critical regions and maintain planetary operations in my absence. My direct chi connection to the core is temporarily satisfied. The stabilization you provided will hold without my presence for the time we require." She turned toward Lithos, who had remained at attention throughout their exchange. "Commander, you have your orders. Continue evacuation protocols for regions 17 through 31. Maintain core stabilization monitoring and prepare emergency response units for potential localized failures." "It will be done, my queen," Lithos responded with formal precision, though Ben detected concern in the commander's tone. "The Imperial Guard stands ready to defend Hexern in your absence." Chaquetrix nodded, then turned back to Ben and Lumina. "My personal vessel is equipped for interdimensional transit, though not with the sophistication of your Prism Arc." "The Arc can accommodate additional passengers," Lumina offered, her harmonics suggesting careful diplomacy. "Its adaptive architecture will configure appropriate environments for geohexian physiology." "Acceptable," Chaquetrix acknowledged with surprising readiness. "Time is our most precious resource now. I require only moments to gather essential equipment and issue final commands." As Chaquetrix moved to consult with her commanders, Ben turned to Lumina, keeping his voice low. "This is either going to make things much easier or infinitely more complicated when we meet the other queens." "Indeed," Lumina agreed, her internal lights pulsing in patterns suggesting complex calculations. "Chaquetrix and Aquaria maintain relatively stable diplomatic relations, but Nyx and Pyralus." She trailed off meaningfully. "Historical conflicts," Ben guessed. "The understatement of 12 millennia," Lumina replied dryly. "The last direct meeting between Chaquetrix and Pyralus created a gravitational anomaly that destroyed 3 uninhabited star systems." Ben winced. "That's not encouraging. Which is why your presence as a neutral intermediary may prove essential," Lumina observed. "The bearer of the Chaquetrix stands outside our ancient power dynamics. You represent something new, potentially a balancing force." Before Ben could respond, Chaquetrix returned, now wearing what appeared to be ceremonial armor composed of multiple precious stones and metals, each piece inscribed with geometric patterns that pulsed with inner light. At her waist hung a massive warhammer that seemed carved from a single diamond. though Ben suspected far more sophisticated technology than its primitive appearance suggested. "I am prepared," she announced simply. The next focal point. Ben consulted the holographic display still hovering above his transformed device. The Hydralian depths, closest in both physical and dimensional coordinates. Chaquetrix's faceted eyes narrowed slightly. Aquaria's realm. The fluid queen may prove amenable to reason, though her emotional nature makes her unpredictable. "You've had recent contact with her?" Lumina inquired as they began moving toward the chamber exit. "Trade negotiations 3 cycles ago," Chaquetrix confirmed. "Her people provide essential hydrological technologies in exchange for our gravitic stabilization systems. Relations remain cordial." They ascended through the citadel, returning to the surface where both the Prism Ark and several Geohexian vessels awaited. Commander Lithos accompanied them to the landing platform, overseeing the transfer of essential supplies and equipment to the Stellarian vessel. As final preparations were completed, Chaquetrix addressed her commander one last time. "Maintain the Empire until my return, Lithos. If I do not return within 7 days, initiate the contingency protocol." "It will not be necessary, my queen," Lithos responded with fervent loyalty. "We will preserve Hexern for your return." With formalities concluded, they boarded the Prism Ark, its crystalline structure already reconfiguring to accommodate the massive Geohexian queen. What had been a simple control chamber now expanded into a more complex environment with sections specifically adapted to each occupant's physiological requirements. Impressive adaptation capability, Chaquetrix observed as a section of the floor flowed upward, forming a support structure perfectly configured for her silicon-based anatomy. "The Prism Ark incorporates living crystal technology," Lumina explained as she took her position at the central control interface. "It responds to both conscious direction and unconscious needs." Ben settled into his own adapted section, watching as the ship's systems integrated the new passenger into its operational parameters. The holographic displays expanded, now showing 3 distinct interface styles simultaneously: crystalline light patterns for Lumina, geometric stone configurations for Chaquetrix, and conventional controls for Ben's human perception. Setting coordinates for the Hydralian depths, Lumina announced as the vessel lifted from the landing platform. Dimensional transit calculations indicate approximately 5 hours travel time, accounting for increased gravitic distortion near the aqueous threshold. The Prism Ark ascended rapidly, leaving Hexern's troubled surface behind. Through the transparent hull, Ben watched the Geohexian homeworld recede, its once perfect hexagonal continents now marred by massive fractures that spread like spiderwebs across the surface. "We will return in time," he promised, noting Chaquetrix's stoic yet concerned observation of her world. The massive queen turned from the viewport, her faceted eyes focusing on Ben with unsettling intensity. "Perhaps, if we succeed," her voice rumbled through the chamber like distant avalanches. "But success requires understanding, Tennyson. You bear the Chaquetrix, yet I suspect you comprehend little of its true nature or purpose." "That's a fair assessment," Ben acknowledged honestly. "I know it's connected to the dimensional barriers somehow, and that it can stabilize the convergence points, but beyond that." He shrugged. Chaquetrix settled her massive form into the support structure provided by the ship, her silicon plates shifting into a configuration that Ben interpreted as contemplative. The Chaquetrix was not merely a key or tool as many legends suggest. It was a binding agent, created to maintain separation between realities that were never meant to touch. "Separation?" Ben questioned, glancing at Lumina who monitored their departure trajectory. "Not connection." "Both," Chaquetrix clarified. "The ancient records of my people speak of a time before the current universal order, when realities led into one another without clear boundaries. The resulting chaos nearly destroyed existence itself until the architects created barriers between worlds." Lumina joined the conversation as the ship cleared Hexern's gravitational influence. The Chaquetrix was their final creation, a tool that could both separate and connect, depending on the bearer's intention. "And when it was lost," Chaquetrix continued, "the barriers began to slowly degrade over millennia. What we experience now is the culmination of that long decay, the convergence that was always inevitable without the Chaquetrix's stabilizing influence." The ship accelerated away from the Geohexian system, preparing for dimensional transit. Outside the transparent hull, Space itself seemed to fold as Lumina activated the interdimensional drive, creating a controlled breach in reality through which they could navigate. As they entered the dimensional passage, a crystalline tunnel similar to their previous transit but now tinged with earthy amber hues that reflected Terrax's presence, Ben considered the implications of what he'd learned. So by finding the Chaquetrix, I've essentially taken responsibility for repairing the barriers between realities, he summarized, studying the transformed device on his wrist. And these 5 focal points, they're what? The anchor points where the barriers are weakest. Not merely weakest, Terrax corrected, her deep voice resonating through the ship despite her controlled volume. They are the primary junction points, places where multiple realities naturally converge. In ancient times, these junctions were monitored by guardian civilizations specifically evolved to maintain their stability. Our 5 realms, Lumina added, her harmonic voice creating an interesting counterpoint to Terrax's rumbling bass. Stellarians evolved to maintain light and crystalline resonance across dimensional boundaries. Geohexians stabilize physical structure and gravity. Hydralians manage fluidity and transition. Terrax continued. The Void Dwellers preserve the spaces between, while the Inferno Bearers contain the chaotic energy that would otherwise consume order. Ben absorbed this information, pieces falling into place. So the 5 queens aren't just political leaders, you're literally responsible for maintaining cosmic balance. A responsibility inherited through countless generations, Terrax confirmed, her faceted eyes studying Ben with renewed interest. Which makes your acquisition of the Chaquetrix all the more significant. You are an outsider who now holds the key to our most sacred duty. Lucky me, Ben muttered, though without bitterness. After 15 years as a hero, he'd learned to accept responsibilities that found him whether he sought them or not. As the Prism Arc navigated the dimensional passage, Ben noticed something different about this transit compared to their journey from Stellara to Hexern. The walls of the crystalline tunnels seemed more stable, the energies more balanced. He suspected the presence of 2 queens, representatives of 2 of the 5 fundamental forces, contributed to this stability. The passage is responding to our combined presence, Lumina confirmed, noting his observation. Alone, each sovereign can influence a portion of the dimensional spectrum. Together, our capabilities increase exponentially. Which is why the convergence can only be properly addressed with all 5 sovereigns working in concert, Terrax added. A reality our ancestors understood but that we have forgotten in our isolation. The implication hung in the air, that the very separation of the 5 queens might have contributed to the current crisis. Ben filed this insight away for future consideration, recognizing its potential RTANCE in navigating the complex politics ahead. For now, they traveled toward their next destination, the fluid realm of Queen Aquaria, where water and transition would present challenges unlike the solid structures they'd left behind. The convergence continued to spread across multiple realities, dimensional barriers thinning with each passing hour. And somewhere beyond those barriers, intelligent forces waited, pushing against weakened points, seeking entry into a universe not their own. The game had only just begun, and Ben Tennyson, hero of Earth, bearer of the Omnitrix, and now custodian of the Chaquetrix, found himself once again at the center of a crisis with cosmic implications. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 powerful queens now stood with him, their ancient rivalries temporarily set aside in the face of mutual destruction. As the Prism Arc continued its dimensional transit, Ben allowed himself a small, determined smile. Crisis management was practically his specialty, and diplomatic negotiation had become second nature during his years with the Plumbers. If uniting 5 cosmic queens was what it took to save reality itself, then that's exactly what he would do. The journey to the Hydralian depths continued, carrying them ever deeper into the heart of the convergence. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Tides of Change. Water shimmered like liquid sapphire beneath the pre-SM arc as they descended through Hydralian atmosphere, if atmosphere was even the correct term. The entire planet appeared to be a single, vast ocean without landmasses, its surface rippling with luminescent patterns that pulsed in hypnotic rhythms. Swirling mists danced above the waves, occasionally coalescing into ephemeral structures that formed and dissolved in constant motion. Remarkable, Ben murmured. watching a spiral of luminous fog rise from the ocean surface, twist into what resembled a towering spire, then disperse back into formless mist. There are no solid structures at all. Lumina's crystalline form reflected the ambient blue light as she guided their vessel lower. The Hydralian civilization exists primarily beneath the surface. What you observe are transitory EXPR, eschons of collective thought, temporary manifestations of shared consciousness. Hydralians communicate through environmental manipulation, Chaquetrix added, her massive silicon form positioned at a viewport opposite Ben's. The patterns you see are language, art, and utility combined. Ben studied the ocean beneath them with newfound appreciation. What had appeared random now revealed subtle organization, concentric ripples intersecting to create complex interference patterns, bioluminescent trails following mathematical progressions, mist formations that held position just long enough to transmit information before transforming. They're expecting us, he realized, noting how the patterns now converged toward a specific point ahead, a vast whirlpool that spiraled downward into azure depths. Yes, Lumina confirmed, though whether with welcome or warning remains unclear. The prism arc hovered above the whirlpool, its crystalline structure responding to the surrounding environment by incorporating subtle fluid motions into its previously rigid geometry. Ben noticed how the ship seemed to be adapting to this new realm, becoming less angular, more flowing in its configurations. He entranced to Hydralian sovereign territory, Chaquetrix identified the whirlpool. Few outsiders have been permitted beyond this threshold. Lumina guided the vessel into position above the swirling waters. Transmission incoming from Hydralian Central Authority. The ship's communication system activated, but instead of a conventional holographic image, the bridge filled with a fine mist that coalesced into swirling patterns. Colors flowed through these patterns, predominantly blues and greens but occasionally flashing with violet and silver. No words were spoken, yet Ben somehow understood meaning from the movements. "They're inviting us to descend," he said, surprised by his own comprehension. Chaquetrix's faceted eyes shifted toward him with interest. "You can interpret Hydralian vapor speech. Impressive for a human." Ben glanced at his transformed device. "I think that Chaquetrix is translating somehow." The patterns continued to shift, and he added, "They're specifically requesting the bearer of the key to follow the current path." Lumina's internal lights pulsed in confirmation. Correct interpretation. The Hydralians recognized the Chaquetrix's significance. She adjusted the ship's systems, preparing for submersion. The prism arc can operate underwater indefinitely, though its dimensional navigation capabilities will be somewhat limited. "Will your crystalline struct or be affected by prolonged water exposure?" Ben asked, realizing he knew little about Lumina's physiological limitations. "My molecular structure can maintain integrity in aqueous environments," she assured him. Though her harmonics suggested mild concern. "Though certain light-based communications may be refracted unpredictably." Chaquetrix shifted her massive form, silicon plates reconfiguring to a more compact arrangement. "Geohexian physiology is unaffected by hydrostatic pressure or water immersion. Our concern should be diplomatic rather than physical." Ben nodded, watching as the ship descended toward the whirlpool. "What should I know about Queen Aquaria before we meet her?" The two queens exchanged glances, a notable moment of shared understanding despite their fundamental differences. "Aquaria is," Lumina began, searching for appropriate terms, "mercurial," Chaquetrix finished decisively. "Her emotional states flow as readily as her physical form." "Physical form?" Ben questioned. "Hydralians are fluid-state beings," Lumina explained. "Their bodies maintain general humanoid structure but can reconfigure like water shifting between containers. And Aquaria possesses unusually advanced shapeshifting abilities, even for her species," Chaquetrix added. "She can adopt forms that mimic other species with remarkable precision. Most significantly," Lumina continued, her harmonics taking on cautionary tones, "she is a natural empath. Hydralians sense emotional states through chemical and electrical signals, but Aquaria's abilities transcend normal parameters. She will know your feelings before you fully recognize them yourself." "Great," Ben muttered. "No pressure there." The prism arc entered the whirlpool, its adaptive shielding creating a perfect bubble of stability around the vessel as swirling waters engulfed them. Daylight dimmed as they descended, replaced by bioluminescent illumination that grew more intense with depth. The tunnel of spiraling water Aried them downward for several minutes before suddenly opening into a vast underwater expanse that took Ben's breath away. Sprawling before them was a city unlike any he'd encountered in 15 years of interstellar travel. No rigid structures or permanent architecture dominated the landscape. Instead, the Hydralian civilization existed as a living symphony of constant motion. Buildings formed from controlled water currents held in complex configurations by some unseen force, transparent bubble chambers connected by flowing tubes that Hydralians could swim through, massive coral-like growth that pulsed with inner light and served as community hubs. The city extended in all directions, utilizing three-dimensional space with perfect efficiency. Schools of Hydralians moved through their environment with fluid grace, humanoid figures composed of translucent blue-green material that rippled with every movement, their forms maintaining cohesion without rigid boundaries. Incredible, Ben whispered, genuinely awed by the living architecture. The entire city is in constant motion. Reflection of their philosophy, Chaquetrix noted, her deep voice rumbling through the chamber. Hydralians believe that permanence is illusion, only change remains constant. Their vessel followed a current path marked by particularly bright bioluminescence, descending deeper into the heart of the underwater metropolis. As they progressed, Ben noticed Hydralians pausing in their activities to observe their passage, ripples of communication spreading through the community like waves from thrown stones. Word of our arrival spreads, Lumina observed. Collective awareness is nearly instantaneous in Hydralian society. The current path led them toward what appeared to be the city's center, a massy spherical chamber formed from swirling water currents that created a perfect bubble of air within the ocean depths. Inside this chamber, flashes of activity were visible even from a distance, figures moving in what appeared to be some form of ceremony or gathering. The convergence chamber, Chaquetrix identified. Aquaria holds court where water meets air, the boundary between states. The prism RK approached an opening that appeared in the swirling water wall, perfectly sized for their vessel. As they passed through, Ben felt a subtle shift in pressure as they transitioned from water to air environment. The ship settled gently onto a platform composed of what appeared to be living coral infused with bioluminescent organisms. The Hydralians are permitting direct access rather than requiring transition protocols. Lumina noted with surprise. This suggests urgency beyond normal diplomatic procedure. The ship's adaptive hull reconfigured, creating an exit appropriate for their diverse physiologies. As the opening formed, Ben heard sounds for the first time since their arrival, a haunting melody that seemed composed of water droplets falling at varying intervals, creating complex harmonic patterns that resonated throughout the chamber. Sovereignty music, Chaquetrix explained quietly. Performed only in the Queen's presence. They emerged onto the coral platform, which seemed to respond to their weight by subtly reinforcing its structure beneath them. The chamber extended around them in a perfect sphere approximately 200 meters in diameter. Its walls consisted of constantly moving water, yet somehow contained the air pocket without mixing. The floor was a mosaic of living coral and crystal formations that shifted colors in rhythm with the water drop music. Throughout the chamber, Hydralians moved with fluid grace, their translucent bodies flowing between humanoid forms and more abstract configurations as they performed various court functions. Unlike the blue-green citizens they'd observed outside, these Hydralians displayed more varied coloration, with intricate patterns swirling through their liquid forms that Ben suspected indicated rank or specialization. At the chamber's center rose a dais formed from spiraling water currents that somehow maintained solid-seeming structure despite their constant motion. Atop this dais was a throne unlike any Ben had ever seen, a continuously shifting chair composed of water that flowed upward from the floor, curled into an elegant seat, then cascaded back down in a perpetual cycle. And upon this fluid throne sat Queen Aquaria. Ben's first impression was of living art in constant motion. Unlike her subjects, Aquaria's form shimmered with every color imaginable. Blues predominated, but greens, violets, silvers, and occasionally flashes of gold flowed through her translucent body in patterns too complex to follow. Her general shape was humanoid but more idealized than functional, curves and angles balanced in perfect aesthetic harmony that seemed to reference multiple species concepts of beauty simultaneously. Her hair flowed around her head like underwater plants swaying in gentle currents, OCC. occasionally separating into tendril-like structures that moved with apparent purpose rather than random motion. Her face was a masterpiece of fluid expression, features forming with perfect clarity when she focused on something, then dissolving into more abstract patterns when at rest. Most striking were her eyes, deeper blue than the surrounding ocean, with pupils that expanded and contracted like tide pools responding to lunar influence. These eyes focused immediately on their small party as they approached the dais, widening slightly upon recognizing the two queens accompanying Ben. No guards moved to intercept them. Yet Ben sensed invisible protocols at work as the assembled court shifted position, creating a direct path to the throne while maintaining respectful observation. When they reached the appropriate distance, somehow Ben knew exactly where to stop without being told. The water drop music ceased, leaving expectant silence. For several heartbeats, Aquaria simply observed them, her fluid body shifting through subtle color variations that seemed to reflect rapid thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice flowed like mountain streams over smooth stones, musical, fluid, yet carrying unmistakable authority beneath its gentle surface. The stars whispered of impossibility, yet here it manifests before my court. Her gaze moved from Lumina to Chaquetrix. Light and stone Togoth. After 2,000 years of carefully maintained separation, her attention finally settled on Ben, eyes narrowing slightly. And the human who bridges worlds carries the artifact of legend. Ben stepped forward, diplomatically maintaining equal distance between his two royal companions. Queen Aquaria, I'm Ben Tennyson. We've come because your realm faces the same threat currently affecting Stellara and Hexern. Aquaria's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Direct as rainfall, this one. She rose from her throne, her body flowing downward rather than stepping, reforming the dais's base just meters from where they stood. Up close, Ben realized she was taller than he'd initially perceived, nearly 7 feet in height, her proportions shifting subtly as she moved to maintain perfect balance. Her liquid nature meant she could expand or contract at will, making her true size somewhat ambiguous. I know why you have come, Benjamin Tennyson, she continued, circling them with fluid grace. The currents between worlds grow turbulent. Ancient boundaries erode like shorelines against rising tides. She paused before Lumina, studying the crystalline queen with obvious curiosity. Your realm's perfect structures fracture along mathematical fault lines. Moving to Chaquetrix, she continued without waiting for confirmation. Your empire of stone cracks from within, continental plates seeking divorce after eons of forced marriage. The Geohexian queen remained stoically silent, though her silicon plates shifted slightly in what Ben now recognized as discomfort under scrutiny. Aquaria completed her circuit, stopping before Ben. Without warning, she extended a fluid hand, her fingers elongating unnaturally to hover just centimeters from his transformed wrist device. May I? Ben nodded permission, extending his arm toward her. Aquaria's liquid fingers made contact with the Omnitrix Chaquetrix, her touch cool but not unpleasant. The moment connection was established. Her entire form flashed with brilliant light that momentarily illuminated her internal structure, revealing complex patterns that resembled circuit pathways throughout her seemingly simple liquid body. She withdrew her hand, her expression shifting through multiple emotions too quickly to follow before settling on what appeared to be wonder tinged with apprehension. The stories were incomplete, she whispered. More to herself than to them. Not merely a key but a map. Not simply a tool but a living archive. Her eyes refocused on Ben with new intensity. You cannot possibly comprehend what you carry, Landwalker. I'm learning quickly, Ben replied evenly. Enough to know that the dimensional barriers are failing at 5 specific points across the galaxy, and your realm is one of them. Aquaria's form rippled with what might have been a sigh. Indeed, the symptoms manifest differently here than in realms of crystal or stone. She gestured toward the swirling water walls surrounding them. Our currents lose cohesion. Pressure variations occur without physical cause. Entire communities have been lost to sudden phase transitions, water becoming something neither liquid, solid, nor gas, but something. She hesitated. Something other. We've observed similar phenomena, Lumina confirmed, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's ambient light. Dimensional BL. Eating that affects fundamental properties of matter. And entities attempting to breach the weakened barriers, Chaquetrix added, her deep voice resonating through the chamber. Intelligences from Bayo. ND seeking entry through the convergence points. Aquaria's eyes widened, colors swirling through her form in patterns suggesting alarm. You have sensed them too. The watchers beyond the veil. Ben nodded grimly. During our dimensional transit between realms, something is using the weakened barriers as access points. The Hydralian Queen's form seemed to momentarily lose some cohesion before she reasserted control. Then matters are worse than I feared. Come. She gestured toward a previously invisible doorway that appeared in the chamber wall. You must see what happens in the deepest trenches. She glided toward the opening, her body flowing rather than walking in the conventional sense. Ben exchanged glances with his royal companions before following, noting how Lumina moved with crystalline precision while Terrax's heavy footfalls created subtle vibrations through the living coral floor. The passage led them through a series of interconnected chambers, each utilizing the bow Nadari between water and air in different configurations. Some contained reverse bubbles, spheres of water suspended within air pockets. Others featured complex cascade systems where water flowed upward against gravity before cycling back through elaborate patterns. Your control over water is remarkable, Ben observed as they passed through a particularly impressive chamber where liquid formed imp. OS Cybele architectural structures that should have collapsed under their own weight. Not control, Aquaria corrected, her voice rippling with nuance. Partnership. We do not command water, we commune with it. The molecules choose their configurations through mutual understanding of purpose. The distinction seemed important to her, so Ben nodded respectfully. I apologize for the mischaracterization. Aquaria's form shimmered with what might have been appreciation. Your adaptability serves you well, Benjamin Tennyson. Few land dwellers comprehend the difference between domination and harmony. Their path eventually led to what appeared to be an observation deck extending into open water. As they stepped onto the transparent platform, Ben realized they were now much deeper than their arrival point. Pressure and darkness had increased significantly, held at bay only by the Hydralian's environmental manipulation. Aquaria gestured toward the depths beyond the platform. Observe the YSS where our most ancient communities dwell. Far below, bioluminescent lights revealed a sprawling deep-sea settlement. Unlike the constantly shifting structures of the upper city, these formations appeared more stable, massive organic growths that reminded Ben of coral reefs combined with deep-sea thermal vent ecosystems. Hydralians moved through this environment in forms more adapted to extreme pressure, their bodies denser, movements more deliberate. The deep dwellers maintain our oldest traditions, Aquaria explained. They remember what surface communities have forgotten, the time before separation, when boundaries between realms remained permeable. As they watched, a disturbance became visible at the settlement's edge. What Ben initially took for unusual current patterns revealed itself as something far more disturbing. Sections of water literally unraveling, molecules separating and reforming into configurations that defied physical laws. The effect spread like ink through water, transforming everything it touched into something neither liquid nor solid but something that hurt his eyes to observe directly. Phase disruption, Lumina identified, her harmonic voice containing tones of scientific alarm. Fundamental properties of matter breaking down as dimensional barriers weaken. It began 7 cycles ago, Aquaria confirmed, her liquid form darkening with emotion. Small anomalies at first, easily contained. But each occurrence grows larger, lasts longer, affects more complex systems. Her voice quieted to a whisper. 3,000 deep dwellers were lost in the last phase shift. Their molecular patterns, scattered across realities. The implications were horrifying. Not destruction but dissolution, consciousness dispersed across dimensional boundaries without hope of reconstitution. The convergence manifests uniquely in each realm according to its fundamental nature, Terrax observed grimly. In Hexern, solid becomes unstable. Here, liquid loses coherence. Can you contain it? Ben asked, studying the disturbing phenomenon with both normal and enhanced perception. Through the Chaquetrix's influence, he perceived the dimensional fractures underlying the visible effects, tears in reality's fabric through which other laws of physics bled into this universe. Temporarily, Aquaria replied, gesturing toward devices positioned around the CTED area, spherical objects that pulsed with rhythmic energy. Harmonic stabilizers can reverse small phase disruptions, but their effectiveness diminishes with each occurrence. Her liquid features formed a grimace of frustration. And they do nothing to address the true cause. Which is why we're here, Ben stated, raising his transformed wrist. The Chaquetrix seems designed to repair these dimensional fractures. On Stellara and Hexern, we were able to temporarily stabilize the convergence points. Aquaria's eyes focused on his device with newfound intensity. The ancient texts speak of the key's power to mend the boundaries between worlds. Her gaze lifted to his face. But they also warn that its power flows from its bearer's intentions. The key amplifies purpose, for preservation or destruction. The subtle test in her words was clear. Ben met her gaze steadily. My intention is to protect all worlds, all peoples. I've spent 15 years defending Earth and other planets from threats. This is just a larger scale of the same mission. Something changed in Aquaria's expression, a softening, a recognition. Without warning, she flowed forward, her liquid form stopping just inches from him. This close, he could see the incredible complexity of her internal structure, currents within currents, patterns that shifted in response to thoughts and emotions. Yes, she said softly. I see the truth of it now. Before Ben could respond, she raised a hand to his temple, her touch cool against his skin. The contact lasted only seconds, but in that brief moment, Ben experienced a disorienting flood of impressions, emotions not his own washing through his consciousness, perspectives shifting like kaleidoscope images, understanding deepening without words. When Aquaria withdrew her hand, Ben staggered slightly, the intensity of the connection leaving him momentarily disoriented. Apologies, she said, though her tone suggested she considered the intrusion necessary rather than regrettable. Empathic verification confirms what logic suggested. You are indeed worthy to bear the key. Terrax shifted forward slightly, her massive silicon form radiating subtle disapproval. Such invasive techniques were not necessary, Water Queen. Tennyson's actions on Hexern proved his intentions. Different elements, different methods of knowing, Aquaria replied without apology. Her liquid body rippling with subtle defiance. You verify through observation of action, Stone Queen. I verify through direct communion with intention. Lumina intervened before the exchange could escalate. Both approaches have merit when time permits their application. Currently, however, our priority must be addressing the immediate crisis. The diplomatic intervention worked, both queens subsiding into reluctant agreement. Ben, having recovered from the empathic contact, refocused on the phase disruption still visible in the deep settlement. Can we get closer? He asked Aquaria. Eager to interface directly with the disruption point to understand how the Chaquetrix might stabilize it. The Hydralian queen studied him with newfound respect. Brave request. The boundary zone is H. Azardus. Matter exists in unstable states that could affect your molecular cohesion. I can transform into forms more resistant to such effects, Ben assured her. And the Chaquetrix seems to provide additional protection against dimensional anomalies. Aquaria considered briefly before nodding. We will require transport adapted to deep pressure environments. She turned toward a nearby hydral, an attendant who had maintained a respectful distance throughout their conversation. Prepare the sovereign sphere for descent. The attendant's liquid form pulsed acknowledgement before flowing away to execute the command. Aquaria turned back to her visitors. The descent will take us to the primary rupture point. Are your physiologies prepared for extreme conditions? Lumina's crystalline form, refracted light in patterns suggesting confidence. My structure can withstand deep ocean pressures without compromise. Geohexians evolved under pressures far exceeding your ocean depths, Terrax stated simply. Her tone suggesting she found the question almost insulting. Ben activated his transformed device, cycling through available options. Ripjaws should handle the environment without problems. The transformation washed over him, converting his human form to the fish-like Piscis-Volan. As with previous transformations, the Chaquetrix component adapted seamlessly, integrating with Ripjaw's anatomy and enhancing his natural aquatic abilities with subtle crystalline structures along his fins and gill systems. Aquaria observed the transformation with undisguised fascination, her liquid body moving closer to study his new form. Remarkable adaptation. Piscis' physiological structure with enhanced osmoregulatory capabilities. She circled him, liquid fingers extending to exam. in his modified gill structures without actually touching them. The Chaquetrix integration appears to optimize your transformed states beyond their natural parameters. Ben nodded, his ripjaws form, allowing comfortable speech despite the adaptations for underwater breathing. I've noticed enhanced capabilities in each transformation since the merger. The key recognizes potential and amplifies it, Aquaria confirmed. Another reason its bearer's intentions matter so profoundly. Their conversation paused as a large spherical vessel approached the observation platform. Unlike conventional submarines, this craft appeared to be composed of the same living coral as much of the Hydralian architecture, its surface dotted with bioluminescent organisms that provided both light and apparent system indicators. The sovereign sphere, Aquaria announced with evident pride. Grown rather than built, its neural pathways respond to Hydralian thought patterns while maintaining environments suitable for diverse physiologies. The sphere settled against the platform edge, a section of its surface rippling before dilating open like a massive iris. The interior revealed a surprisingly spacious chamber with various observation stations and what appeared to be living control interfaces, tendrils and nodules of coral-like material that pulsed with inner light. "Please enter," Aquaria invited, her form flowing through the opening with fluid grace. Ben followed in his ripjaws form, noting how the vessel seemed to recognize and respond to his presence, subtle adjustments in lighting and int. RNAL atmosphere occurring automatically to accommodate his physiology. Lumina and Terrax entered after him, the sphere expanding slightly to comfortably contain Terrax's massive silicon form. Once all were aboard, the opening sealed seamlessly, the living material flowing together without visible seam. Aquaria moved to what appeared to be the central control node, a cluster of bioluminescent coral formations arranged in a rough hemisphere. As her liquid hands made contact with the living controls, the entire vessel hummed with responsive energy. "Neural interface established," she announced as the sphere detached from the platform. Descent commencing. The sovereign sphere moved with surprising grace for something that appeared so organic and primitive. It descended smoothly into the dark waters, bioluminescent exterior providing necessary illumination as they left the light of the settlement behind. Through transparent sections of the hull, Ben watched as pressure increased and water darkened. Yet the vessel maintained perfect internal equilibrium. "The sphere generates its own microenvironment," Aquaria explained, noting his interest in their surroundings. Pressure, temperature, atmospheric composition, all maintained at optimal levels for occupants while allowing direct interaction with external conditions when desired. "Impressive bioengineering," Lumina acknowledged, her crystalline form adapting to the vessel's gentle motion with subtle adjustments to maintain balance. "Your people's integration of biological and technological systems exceeds even Stellarian capabilities in some respects." Coming from the technologically advanced Crystal Queen, this was significant praise. Aquaria's form rippled with what Ben interpreted as pleased acknowledgement. "Different approaches to similar challenges," she replied diplomatically. "Your people crystallize knowledge for permanence, mine encode it in living memory for adaptability." Their descent continued for several minutes, the darkness outside becoming nearly absolute except for occasional bioluminescent sea creatures that drifted past like living stars. The pressure indicators on the vessel's internal displays showed depths that would crush conventional submarines, yet the sovereign sphere maintained its integrity without apparent strain. "We approach the primary rupture zone," Aquaria announced, her tone growing more somber. "Prepare yourselves. What you will witness defies conventional physics." The sphere's external lights intensified, illuminating what appeared to be an underwater canyon of staggering proportions. Its walls stretched beyond visibility despite the powerful illumination, suggesting depth and scale beyond easy comprehension. But what drew everyone's attention was the disturbance at the canyon's center, a writhing mass of something that both was and wasn't water. Ben stared through both normal and enhanced perception. To his ripjaw's eyes, it appeared as water behaving impossibly, flowing against gravity, separating into component molecules that maintained position without bonds, forming structures that should collapse instantly yet somehow persisted. Through the Chaquetrix's influence, he perceived the truth beneath these visible symptoms, a literal tear in dimensional fabric, a wound in reality through which other laws of physics bled into this universe. "By the eternal stone," Terrax murmured, her deep voice uncharacteristically subdued. "The boundary failure is more extensive than on Hexern." "Confirmed," Lumina's harmonics suggested deep concern. Dim. Enchannel integrity compromised across multiple frequency bands. Estimate complete phase transition of this region within 48 hours if unchecked. Aquaria guided the sphere closer to the phenomenon, maintaining safe distance while allowing detailed observation. The disruption grows approximately 12% daily. Our harmonic stabilizers slow progression but cannot reverse it. Her liquid features formed an expression of profound sadness. The deep dwellers who were lost, their molecular patterns showed evidence of reconfiguration according to alien physical laws before dispersal. The implications were horrifying. Not merely destruction but transformation according to incomprehensible rules from another reality. I need to get closer, Ben decided, studying the dimensional wound with growing understanding of what the Chaquetrix might do to heal it. Can the sphere approach the boundary zone safely? Aquaria's internal colors darkened with concern. Negative. Even with sovereign sphere protection, proximity risks molecular destabilization for all aboard. She hesitated, liquid form rippling with internal conflict before resolution formed. However, I can accompany you to the interaction threshold. My fluid nature allows adaptation to phase variances that would destroy solid-state beings. Chaquetrix shifted forward, her silicon plates reconfiguring in what Ben now recognized as an expression of concern. Such exposure poses significant risk, even to hydrolian physiology. Risk acknowledged, Aquaria replied simply. Necessity outweighs caution. Ben nodded, respecting her decision while formulating his own plan. I'll need to transform into something with greater energy manipulation capabilities. Ripjaws is good for the aquatic environment, but not ideal for dimensional repair. The sphere can create a temporary stability bubble at the disruption perimeter, Aquaria offered, her hands already configuring the living controls. It will provide approximately 3 minutes of protected interaction before dimensional bleeding compromises its integrity. That should be enough time, Ben confirmed, already cycling through his transformation options. Feedback would be ideal for energy manipulation, but might be compromised in this environment. NRG could withstand the conditions, but lacks precision. He settled on a form, activating the transformation. Alien X. The change was instant and dramatic, his body converting to the celestial sapien form, skin becoming living cosmic energy, white stars dotting the void black of his transformed state. The Chaquetrix component adapted differently this time. Rather than forming physical structures, it manifested as geometric patterns of pure energy that orbited his form like an elaborate mathematical model of an atom. Aquaria gasped, her liquid body momentarily losing cohesion before reforming at a slight distance. Celestial sapien, she whispered, awe evident in her flowing voice. The end spoke truly. The bearer would command powers rivaling the ancient architects themselves. Even Chaquetrix and Lumina showed visible reactions to this transformation, the Silicon Queen's plates shifted. In what might have been defensive reconfiguration, while Lumina's internal lights pulsed in patterns suggesting both fascination and caution. Ben had expected this reaction. The celestial sapien form was his most powerful transformation, but also his most problematic due to the multiple personalities that typically required consensus for any action. What he hadn't anticipated was how differently the form would function with the Chaquetrix integrated. Instead of the familiar mental debate between Serena and Bellicus, the voices of love and rage that usually inhabited his Alien X form, Ben reinstated perfect clarity and uncontested control. The Chaquetrix somehow bypassed or harmonized the conflicting personalities, granting him full access to celestial sapien capabilities without the usual limitations. This is different, he stated, his voice resonating with cosmic harmonics that made the very molecules of water around them vibrate in sympathy. I have complete control without internal conflict. The key harmonizes disparate elements, Aquaria observed with newfound understanding. It unifies that which exists in opposition. Ben nodded, already focused on their mission. We should proceed before this form draws unwanted attention across dimensional boundaries. Celestial sapiens exist partially outside conventional reality. Prolonged manifestation might accelerate the very convergence we're trying to prevent. Aquaria moved to a different control configuration, preparing interaction chamber for deployment. Queen Lumina, Queen Chaquetrix, please maintain position here. E-stability bubble cannot accommodate your physical dimensions alongside both myself and the celestial sapien form. Neither queen appeared pleased with this arrangement, but both recognized the practical necessity. Chaquetrix inclined her massive head in reluctant acknowledgement. Proceed with caution. The dimensional energies may behave unpredictably in presence of a celestial sapien. We will tour from here and intervene if conditions deteriorate, Lumina added, her crystalline form positioning near monitoring systems that adapted to interface with her light-based communication methods. A section of the sphere's hull reconfigured, forming a smaller chamber that extended outward like an airlock. Aquaria gestured for Ben to join her within this new space. The interaction module will detach and approach the disruption zone, she explained as the partition sealed behind them, separating them from the main vessel. I will maintain environmental stability while you attempt dimensional repair. Ben nodded, his celestial sapien form somehow both imposing and graceful in the confined space. I'll need to work quickly. This form exists partially in multiple realities simultaneously. The disruption may attempt to use that connection as a conduit for further deterioration. Understood, Aquaria confirmed, her liquid body reconfiguring to interface directly with the module's living controls. Detachment in 3, 2, 1. The module separated from the sovereign sphere with a subtle vibration, its bioluminescent exterior intensifying as independent systems activated. With Aquaria's guidance, it moved purposefully toward the dimensional disruption, approaching the writhing boundary where physics itself became unreliable. As they drew closer, Ben observed the phenomenon his celestial sapien perception, abilities that transcended conventional senses. What had appeared as water behaving impossibly now revealed itself as something far more fundamental, reality itself unraveling. Dimensional barriers thinning to transparency, other universes pressing against the weakened membrane of their own. Most disturbing were the shadowy presences he detected beyond the barrier. Entities of non-baryonic composition observing the deterioration with what he somehow knew was calculated intent. These weren't random forces or natural phenomena, this was deliberate interference. They're watching us, he stated. Cosmic voice resonating within the small chamber. Intelligence beyond the barrier, monitoring the convergence. Aquaria's liquid form darkened with concern. You perceive the watchers directly. Even our most sensitive empaths detect only vague impressions. Celestial sapiens exist across multiple dimensional planes, Ben explained, never taking his star-filled eyes from the boundary distortion. We're approaching the interaction threshold. Are you ready? Aquaria's body flowed into a more streamlined configuration, internal currents accelerating as she prepared for the strain ahead. Yes, the stability bubble will activate on proximity alert. The module continued its approach, internal systems beginning to register warnings as fundamental physical constants began to fluctuate. Temperature, pressure, even gravity itself became variable rather than fixed, subtle at first, then increasingly pronounced as they neared the boundary zone. Stability threshold in 5 seconds, Aquaria announced, her liquid form working in perfect synchronization with the living vessel. 4, 3, 2, 1, engaging. The module's exterior pulsed with brilliant bioluminescence as it generated a field of localized stability, a bubble of enforced physics within which normal universal laws remained constant despite the chaos beyond. Through the transparent section of hull, Ben could see the dimensional wound just meters away, a writhing vortex of impossibility where water molecules danced to alien rhythms. Beginning dimensional repair sequence, he stated, raising both hands toward the distortion. With his celestial sapien abilities enhanced by the Chaquetrix, Ben perceived the exact nature of the damage, not simply a tear but a complex fractal pattern of interconnected weaknesses, each feeding into the others in a self-reinforcing cycle of deterioration. The challenge wasn't simply sealing a breach but reweaving reality's fabric at the quantum level. He reached out with both physical and mental energy, the geometric patterns orbiting his celestial sapien form accelerating and expanding to interface with the dimensional wound. The moment connection established, Ben felt the enormity of what he faced. Not just this breach, but echoes of countless others across multiple universes, all connected through subquantum filaments too fine for even advanced technology to detect. Working with precision that transcended conventional physics, he began restructuring the dimensional boundaries, not forcing them back to their original configuration, which would only fail again. but creating a new integration that acknowledged the pressure while redirecting its flow. Like a master engineer reinforcing a dam by creating controlled release channels, Ben established dimensional conduits that would allow minimal, regulated transfer between realities without catastrophic rupture. The process required concentration beyond anything he'd previously attempted, manipulating forces at levels where the distinction between energy and information, matter and thought, became meaningless. Throughout, he remained acutely aware of the intelligences beyond the barrier, watching, analyzing, occasionally testing his work with subtle pressures that sought weaknesses. After what felt like hours but the module's chronometers would later show as just under 3 minutes. Ben completed the primary restructuring. The dimensional wound didn't seal completely, that would require coordinated action at all 5 convergence points simultaneously, but its chaotic deterioration stabilized into a controlled, predictable pattern that could be maintained without continuous intervention. He lowered his hands, the orbiting geometric pattern slowing as he disengaged from the repair matrix. It's done. Not permanent, but stable enough to prevent further expansion for approximately 5 standard days. Aquaria's liquid form pulsed with colors suggesting both relief and fascination. Extraordinary work. The harmonic resonance patterns have shifted from chaotic to structured progression. Her expression became curious as she observed him more closely. Yet you seem troubled despite success. Ben's star-filled eyes remained focused on the now stabilized boundary. The entities beyond the barrier. They weren't trying very hard to stop me. It felt more like they were studying my methods, learning the Chaquetrix's capabilities. Strategic assessment rather than immediate intervention, Aquaria suggested, already guiding the module away from the boundary zone. Perhaps they play a longer game than simple invasion. Perhaps, Ben agreed, though uncertainty lingered. As they retreated to safe distance, he reverted from Alien X to his human form, the energy expenditure leaving him momentarily fatigued despite the Chaquetrix's support. The module reattached to the Sovereign Sphere, the living partition flowing aside to reunite them with Lumina and Terrax. Both queens showed visible relief at their return, though they expressed it differently. Lumina's crystalline form brightening with increased internal light, while Terrax's silicon plates shifted to a less defensive configuration. Dimensional stabilization confirmed, Lumina stated, her harmonic voice containing tones of scientific approval. Sensors indicate 93% reduction in phase disruption propagation. The repair matrix is holding, Terrax added, her deep voice rumbling with cautious optimism. Though energy signatures suggest temporary rather than permanent resolution. As expected, Ben confirmed, settling into an adapted seat that the living vessel formed for him. We need to address all 5 convergence points before implementing permanent repairs. The connections between focal points make individual solutions unstable long-term. Aquaria guided the Sovereign Sphere upward, beginning their ascent from the abyssal depths. As they rose, the water outside gradually lightened from absolute darkness to deep blue, then lighter aquamarine as they approached the levels where Hydralian civilization concentrated. 3 realms secured, temporarily, she stated, her fluid form rippling thoughtfully. 2 remain, the void and the flame. Her internal colors darkened slightly. Nyx and Pyrrhus will prove challenging to convince. You'll accompany us, then? Ben asked, though her statement had already implied as much. Aquaria's liquid features formed what might have been a smile, curves flowing into new configurations that suggested wry amusement. The convergence leaves little choice. Does it not? My realm's fate intertwines with all others. She glanced toward her fellow queens. Besides, curiosity compels me. 3 sovereigns together for the first time in millennia. What might 5 accomplish when necessity overcomes ancient divisions? The subtle challenge in her tone wasn't lost on her royal companions. Lumina's crystalline structure, irrefracted light in patterns suggesting diplomatic consideration, while Terrax's silicon plates shifted in what might have been reluctant acknowledgement. Necessity indeed, the Geohexian queen rumbled. Though proximity to Pyrrhus tests even necessity's demands, Lumina intervened before tension could escalate. Each sovereign brings essential capabilities to our coalition. The Void Queen's dimensional perception and the Flame Queen's energy manipulation will prove crucial for comprehensive convergence resolution. Assuming they don't immediately attempt to obliterate each other upon meeting, Aquaria noted with fluid casualness that didn't quite hide genuine concern. Their last encounter created the Obsidian Nebula from what had been 17 inhabited worlds. Ben processed this sobering information. Recognizing the diplomatic challenge ahead made planetary stabilization seem almost simple by comparison. I'm guessing there's significant history there. History barely encompasses the complexity. Aquaria replied, liquid fingers dancing through control interfaces as they approached the upper city levels. Nyx and Pyrrhus represent fundamental cosmic forces in opposition, void versus flame. Entropy versus energy, darkness versus light. Their conflict predates our current civilizations. Yet both must participate if the convergence is to be resolved, Lumina stated with crystalline precision. The 5 focal points correspond to our 5 realms precisely because each sovereign controls an essential aspect of dimensional stability. The sovereign sphere emerged from the depths, returning to the air-filled convergence chamber where they had first met Aquaria. As the vessel settled onto its docking platform, Ben considered their next steps, the Chaquetrix pull. Sing gently on his wrist as if in thought alongside him. Which realm should we approach next? He asked as they disembarked, the living vessel sealing behind them. The 3 queens exchanged glances. A moment of silent communication that transcended their fundamental differences. The void realms, Terrax suggested with clear reluctance. Nyx is unpredictable but rational. She will recognize cosmic necessity even if she finds our alliance distasteful. Agreed, Lumina added. Additionally, the void realms exist partially between dimensions already. They will likely experience conversion. CE effects more immediately than the Inferno Sanctum, making intervention there logically prioritized. Aquaria's liquid body rippled with what might have been amusement. Such careful reasoning to justify postponing our confrontation with Pyrrhus. Her expression shifted to seriousness. But I concur. Nyx's realm lies at the intersection of multiple dimensional planes, a natural next step in our journey. Ben nodded, decision made. Then we prepare for the void realms. He glanced at Aquaria. Will you need time to arrange your absence and instruct your people on maintaining the stabilization? The Hydralian Queen's form flowed into a more formal configuration. Minimal preparation required. Unlike stone or crystal civilizations, Hydralian governance continues through distributed consciousness rather than centralized command. She gestured toward the court officials still maintaining respectful distance. My intentions have already been communicated throughout the collective consciousness. Stabilization protocols are being implemented across all communities. True to her words, activity throughout the convergence chamber suggested coordinated purpose rather than confusion at their queen's impending departure. Hydralians moved with fluid efficiency, adjusting environmental systems and communication networks without requiring explicit instructions. Then we should depart as soon as possible, Ben concluded. The Chaquetrix projecting its now familiar star chart showing the 5 focal points. 3 glowed with steady light indicating temporary stabilization, while 2 remained in critical condition. The void realms pulsing with ominous purple-black energy, the Inferno Sanctum blazing with unstable red. The prism arc can accommodate your physiological requirements, Lumina assured Aquaria. Her crystalline form shifting slightly to address the Hydralian Queen directly. Its adaptive architecture will create appropriate environmental controls for fluid state biology. Thoughtful consideration, Aquaria acknowledged with a ripple of appreciation through her liquid form. Though I assure you, I can maintain cohesion in various environments through conscious regulation. To demonstrate, her body briefly shifted density and surface tension, becoming more solid appearing while maintaining fluid properties. They proceeded from the convergence chamber toward the surface, following flow channels that carried them upward through the living city. As they ascended, Ben observed how Hydralian citizens acknowledged their passage, not with the formal salutes of Geohe. Xions are the precise light communications of Stellarians, but with rippling patterns that flowed through community groups like waves through connected pools. Your people communicate differently than I expected, he noted to Aquaria as they traveled. More collective than individual. Perception shapes reality, Benjamin Tennyson, she replied, her liquid form gliding effortlessly through the water channels. Hydralians exist as both distinct entities and connected consciousness, separation and unity simultaneously, like water molecules that join to form oceans yet remain individually complete. The concept resonated with Ben's developing understanding of the convergence itself. separate realities connected through quantum filaments, distinct yet interdependent. This perspective might prove valuable in addressing the challenges ahead, particularly in the void realms where conventional physics became merely optional. They reached the surface access point where the prism arc awaited, its crystalline structure having adapted to the aquatic environment by incorporating flowing elements into its previously angular design. The ship now resembled a hybrid of crystal and coral, its SUR faces refracting both light and water currents in hypnotic patterns. Impressive adaptation, Aquaria observed, studying the vessel with professional appreciation. Stellarian crystalline technology showing unexpected flexibility. The prism arc was designed specifically for cross-realm transit, Lumina explained as they approached the boarding ramp. Its neural matrices absorb environmental information and reconfigure accordingly. Quote, as they boarded, Ben noticed how the vessel's interior had already begun adapting to anticipate Aquaria's needs, creating flowing pathways and fluid interface. Controls alongside the crystalline and silicon-based systems developed for Lumina and Terrax. His own section remained comfortably human in design, though subtly enhanced with each realm they visited. Preparing for departure, Lumina announced once all were aboard, her crystalline hands interfacing with the ship's primary controls. Calculating dimensional coordinates for the void realms. The holographic display expanded to show their planned route, not a straight line through conventional space but a complex path weaving between dimensional barriers. Unlike their previous journeys, this route appeared particularly convoluted, with multiple phase transitions and reality shifts required to reach their destination. The void realms exist partially outside conventional spacetime, Aquaria explained, noting Ben's questioning expression. Access requires traversing dimensional thresholds in specific sequences, like solving a puzzle lock with moving pieces. Nyx values her privacy, Terrax added dryly, her massive silicon form settling into the support structure the ship had configured for her. The complex approach serves as both security system and screening mechanism. Those lacking patience or precision never reach her domain. The prism arc lifted smoothly from the ocean surface, water sheeting from its adaptive hull as it ascended through Hydralian atmosphere. Through transparent sections, Ben watched the vast ocean planet recede beneath them, its surface rippling with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost like a farewell message written in light across water. As they achieved orbit, the ship's systems reconfigured for dimensional transit. This time, however, Ben noticed differences in the preparation sequence. More complex calculations, additional shield harmonics. Energy patterns he hadn't observed in their previous journeys. Void transit requires additional safeguards, Lumina explained, noting his interest. Conventional matter experiences stress when traversing regions of altered physical constants. Translation. Don't be alarmed if reality stops making sense, Aquaria added, her fluid body rippling with what might have been amusement. The void between dimensions follows different rules than our comfortable universes. The prism arc accelerated toward a predetermined coordinates, its crystalline structure humming with increasing energy. Ahead, space itself seemed to darken subtly, not the absence of light but something more fundamental, as if that region operated under different physical laws. Void threshold approaching, Lumina announced, her internal lights pulsing in complex patterns as she interfaced deeply with the ship's systems. Initiating phase transition in 3, 2, 1. Reality shifted around them, not the smooth transition of their previous dimensional journeys but something altogether more disorienting. Colors inverted then shifted beyond the visible spectrum. Gravity fluctuated wildly before settling into rhythmic pulses rather than constant force. Sound became visible as crystalline patterns in the air while light manifested as harmonic vibrations felt rather than seen. Through the vessel's transparent sections, Ben observed what lay beyond, or tried to, as conventional perception proved inadequate to the task. The space through which they traveled wasn't empty but filled with structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his mind could process, their geometries shifting between states of matter and energy that defied classification. Welcome to the void between realities, Aquaria stated, her liquid form taking on new properties in this environment, rippling with patterns that extended beyond her physical boundaries as if her consciousness expanded into the surrounding space. Here everything you understand about existence becomes merely one option among infinite possibilities. Ben studied their surroundings with both normal perception and the enhanced awareness granted by the Chaquetrix. While his human senses struggled to interpret the void, his transformed device allowed comprehension on a deeper level, revealing the complex mathematical patterns underlying what appeared to be chaos. The consistent rules governing what seemed random. "It's beautiful," he said finally, genuinely awed by the complexity surrounding them. "Terrifying, but beautiful." Chaquetrix shifted uncomfortably, her silicon plates reconfiguring to resist the void's influence on conventional matter. "Beauty exists in order and structure. This place is anathema to both." "Only from certain perspectives," Aquaria countered, her fluid nature seemingly more comfortable in this transitional space. "The void contains perfect order, simply according to principles that defy conventional expression." Lumina maintained focused concentration on navigating their complex course. "Both perspectives have merit. The void operates according to consistent mathematical principles beyond standard dimensionality. Such principles may appear chaotic when projected into three-dimensional perception." Their journey continued through this impossible space, the prism arc following paths visible only through its specialized sensory systems. Occasionally, entities became visible in the surrounding void, beings composed of mathematical concepts rather than matter, intelligences that existed as probability functions rather than physical forms. These entities seemed to observe the vessel's passage with what might have been curiosity, though such anthropomorphic interpretation likely missed their true nature. After what felt like hours but ship chronometers recorded as merely minutes, a structure became visible ahead. If visible adequately described something that existed simultaneously in multiple phase states. It resembled a vast city composed of shadow and geometry, its architecture following rules that allowed buildings to intersect without occupying the same space, spires that extended infinitely while maintaining finite dimensions, and boundaries that remained permeable yet impenetrable. The Threshold City, Aquaria identified, her liquid form rippling with recognition. "Outermost say, Gt element of the Void Realms and gateway to Nixus domain. We're being scanned," Lumina reported as the ship's sensors detected energy patterns washing over their vessel. "Void entities assessing our composition and intent. Expected security protocol," Chaquetrix rumbled, though her massive form tensed perceptibly. "Nix permits no unauthorized entry to her realm." The scan intensified, focusing particularly on Ben and his transformed device. The Chaquetrix pulsed in response, projecting geometric patterns that interacted with the scanning energies, almost like a conversation conducted in mathematical theorems rather than words. After several tense moments, the scan ceased. In its place, a communication manifested, not through conventional systems but as concepts appearing directly in their minds, translated by their individual perceptions into forms they could comprehend. The Queen of Void acknowledges the bearer of the key. The communication conveyed, the mental voice neither male nor female but something that existed beyond such binary concepts. "Passage is granted to the Umbral Citadel. Follow the shadow path that opens before you." True to these words, a pathway manifested ahead, darker than the surrounding void. Its edges defined by mathematical precision rather than physical boundaries. Unlike conventional routes through space, this path seemed to fold dimensions around the vessel, creating shortcuts through reality itself. "Nix expedites our journey," Aquaria observed, surprise evident in her flowing voice. "An unprecedented welcome, or urgency beyond protocol," Chaquetrix countered grimly. "The convergence may manifest more severely in the void realms than in our more conventional dimensions." Lumina guided the prism arc onto the shadow path, the vessel's stems adapting to new physical parameters as they progressed deeper into the void realms. The journey accelerated beyond normal perception, space and time folding around them in patterns too complex to follow, bringing them from the outskirts to the heart of Nixus domain in moments rather than hours. When reality stabilized, or achieved what passed for stability in this realm, they faced a structure that defied comprehension. The Umbral Citadel existed as both physical location and mathematical concept simultaneously, its architecture incorporating dimensions beyond the standard 3+ time. Towers of shadow stuff rose in impossible configurations, their surfaces reflecting light that hadn't been emitted, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. The prism arc settled onto what approximated a docking platform, a surface that remained solid while exhibiting quantum fluctuations visible to enhanced perception. As the vessel established position, a delegation approached. Entities composed of living shadow and geometric precision, their forms shifting between humanoid appearance and abstract mathematical expressions as they moved. Void dwellers, Aquaria identified quietly. Physical manifestations of consciousness that exists primarily in quantum probability states. The delegation stopped at a respectful distance, their shadow forms coalescing into more stable configurations that approximated diplomatic formality. One stepped forward, distinguished by greater complexity in its geometric patterns and deeper shadows that suggested higher dimensional access. The royal emissary, Chaquetrix identified, her deep voice unusually subdued in this environment. Nyx's voice when she chooses not to speak directly. The emissary's form stabilized further, achieving a vaguely humanoid appearance with subtle suggestions of flowing robes composed of shadow stuff. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds while shadows shaped patterns in the air that synchronized with the concepts being conveyed. Bearer of the key, sovereign of light, queen of stone, fluid monarch, the emissary acknowledged each in turn. Queen Nyx awaits your presence in the probability chamber. The convergence accelerates. Time fractures. Choices narrow. The cryptic statement concluded. The emissary turned and began moving toward the citadel proper. The shadow delegatio formed an escort formation around them as they disembarked from the prism arc, its crystalline structure visibly struggling to maintain cohesion in an environment where physical laws remained optional rather than mandatory. Ben walked alongside the three queens, the Chaquetrix pulsing steadily on his wrist as if establishing harmonic resonance with their surroundings. As they entered the umbral citadel, conventional reality receded further. Gravity became directional choice rather than constant force. Light bent around corners to illuminate spaces it shouldn't reach, and sound manifested as visible color patterns in the air. Focus on your internal sense of self, Aquaria advised quietly, her liquid form maintaining cohesion through conscious effort. The void reshapes those who lack strong identity definition. Ben nodded, centering his awareness on his core being, the essential Ben Tennyson beneath transformations and enhancements. The Chaquetrix responded to this mental discipline, creating a subtle field around him that maintained reality consistency within his immediate vicinity. They processed deeper into the impossible architecture, passing chambers where physics itself seemed under construction, fundamental forces being tested in controlled environments, probability matrices shifting in response to observation, time flowing in multiple directions simultaneously within contained fields. Nyx's research continues, Lumina observed, her crystalline form refracting the impossible light in complex patterns. Her understanding of dimensional mechanics exceeds even Stellarian theoretical models. Knowledge without ethical constraint, Chaquetrix rumbled disapprovingly, her silicon form moving with deliberate precision as if resisting the void's influence through sheer stubborn physicality. Perspective shapes judgment, Aquaria countered diplomatically. Nyx perceives across probability streams we cannot access. What appears as ethical disregard may be necessity visible only from her vantage point. Their philosophical discussion paused as they reached their destination, a chamber unlike any Ben had encountered in 15 years of cosmic exploration. The probability chamber existed as both location and concept simultaneously, its boundaries defined by mathematical relationships rather than physical barriers. Within, reality itself appeared as visible patterns. Probability waves flowing like water, timelines branching like crystal formations, dimensional intersections creating geometric structures of breathtaking complexity. And at the chamber's center, if such linear concepts applied in this space, waited Queen Nyx. Ben's first impression was of living paradox given form. Unlike the previous queens whose alien nature still followed comprehensible patterns, Nyx existed as a being of shadow and void given consciousness. Her form shifted continuously between states, sometimes appearing as a tall, elegant humanoid composed of deeper darkness than the surrounding shadows. Sometimes manifesting as pure mathematical theorem expressed in geometric precision, sometimes becoming visible only as the absence of something that should be present. Her saint consistent feature, the only element that remained stable through her continuous transformations, was her eyes. Set in whatever face she momentarily possessed, they remained constant, vast, dark NSES that contained distant stars and galaxies, entire universes reflected in irises that served as windows between realities. When she acknowledged their presence, reality itself seemed to reorient around her attention. Her voice manifested not as sound but as understanding appearing directly in their consciousness, simultaneously intimate and vast beyond comprehension. The convergence accelerates beyond predicted parameters. She stated without preamble, concepts flowing into their minds with perfect clarity despite their complexity. Probability matrices collapse toward singular outcomes. The bearer arrives as calculations foretold, yet variables remain unresolved. Her attention focused fully on Ben, those universe-containing eyes studying him with intensity that felt like being simultaneously observed from infinite perspectives. You carry the key yet comprehend only fragments of its purpose. You walk pathways mapped before your species' evolved consciousness. You stand at the fulcrum point of cosmic restructuring while perceiving merely 3 dimensions plus limited temporal awareness. Despite the overwhelming nature of her presence, Ben met her gaze steadily. I understand, and enough to know that 5 realms face destruction if we don't work together. The Chaquetrix showed us the focal points and guided us here. Nyx's form shifted, briefly resembling a more conventional humanoid shape before flowing back into abstract geometry. Purpose recognized despite limited perspective. Acceptable functionality despite dimensional constraints. Her attention shifted to encompass the 3 queens accompanying him. Old equations reconverging. Light, stone, and water reunited after 17,000 probability cycles. Only flame remains absent from the pattern. The convergence forced cooperation. Chaquetrix stated plainly, her deep voice sounding strangely solid in this fluid reality. Necessity transcends ancient divisions. Necessity, Nyx echoed, the concept rippling through her shadow form like wind through darkness. Our destiny reasserting pattern integrity across probability fluctuations. Philosophical distinctions can wait, Ben interjected diplomatically. What matters now is that the void realms are experiencing the same dimensional crisis as the other focal points. We've temporarily stabilized 3 convergence points, but all 5 must be addressed for permanent resolution. Nyx's attention returned to him, her universe eyes narrowing slightly. The void experiences convergence differently. Where solid realms face structural deterioration, fluid realms lose coherence. The void faces probability collapse. Infinite outcomes compress toward singular trajectories. Possibility itself diminishes. The implications were staggering, not narrow. Why physical destruction but the elimination of alternative futures, the narrowing of cosmic potential to a predetermined path. For beings who existed partially as probability functions, this represent the existential threat beyond mere physical danger. Show us, Ben requested, raising his transformed wrist. The Chaquetrix responds to each convergence point differently. It might reveal solutions specific to the void's unique manifestation. Nyx considered briefly, her form cycling through multiple configurations as if running calculations, before extending what momentarily resembled a hand. From this appendage flowed darkness deeper than mere absence of light, coalescing into a sphere of void stuff that expanded to encompass them all. Reality shifted around them, the probability chamber falling away as they were transported elsewhere without physical movement. When perception stabilized, they stood, or existed, as conventional position became meaningless, at what Ben somehow knew was the dimensional core of the void realms. Unlike the physical cores of planets like Earth or Hexern, this core existed as pure mathematical relationship, the fundamental equations that defined the void's relationship to conventional reality. Here, abstract concept became visible, allowing direct observation of the convergence crisis in its most fundamental form. What should have been elegant, flowing, mathematical harmony had degraded into chaotic discord. Probability streams that should have branched infinitely instead collapsed into narrow channels. Dimensional barriers that should have remained permeable yet distinct had thinned to transparency, allowing alien mathematics to intrude from adjacent realities. Most disturbing were the entities visible through these thin barriers, beings composed of anti-probability. Their nature defined by negation rather than existence. They pressed against weakened points, their influence causing further deterioration as they sought entry into this reality. The negation entities, Nyx identified, her mental voice resonating with rare emotion, something approximating concern. They exist to reduce possibility, to collapse quantum uncertainty into predetermined outcome. Their reality operates according to principles antithetical to free choice and probability divergence. They're the same presences we detected at the other convergence points, Ben realized. The Chaquetrix pulsing with recognition. Not random forces but intelligent entities deliberately weakening dimensional barriers. Correct, Nix confirmed. The convergence serves higher purpose. Reality simplification through dimensional boundary elimination. Where infinite possibilities once existed across separate but connected realities, they seek singular, predictable outcome through forced convergence. The horrifying implication became clear. Not merely physical destruction but the elimination of choice itself, the reduction of infinite potential to predetermined fate. His represented a threat more fundamental than mere physical danger. It struck at the heart of conscious existence. Can the damage be repaired? Lumina asked, her crystalline form struggling to maintain integrity in this abstract environment. Temporarily stabilized, yes, Nix answered, her shadow form flowing through complex configurations. Permanent resolution requires synchronization across all 5 focal points. The pattern must be complete. Ben studied the mathematical chaos with both normal and enhanced perception, the Chaquetrix providing insights his human mind could never have achieved independently. Where others saw abstract equations, he perceived practical relationship, the specific points where intervention might restore temporary balance. I need to interface directly with the probability core, he stated. Already activating his transformation selection. Something with sufficient cognitive processing capacity to comprehend multidimensional mathematics. He settled on a form and activated the transformation. Brainstorm. The change washed over him, converting his human form into the crab-like cerebrocrustacean. As with previous transformations, the Chaquetrix adapted seamlessly, enhancing Brainstorm's natural electroencephalic capabilities with crystalline structures that resembled circuit pathways throughout his exoskeleton. Most fortuitous selection, he stated in Brainstorm's formal, slightly pompous tone. The cerebrocrustacean neuroelectric capabilities, when augmented by the Chaquetrix's dimensional resonance patterns, should provide sufficient computational capacity to analyze and temporarily restructure the probability matrices. Nix's universe eyes studied his transformed state with evident interest. Fascinating adaptation. Biology. Cal computing enhanced by interdimensional crystalline technology. Approach the convergence nexus. I will provide access to primary probability streams. The Shadow Queen gestured with a temporarily formed appendage, creating an opening in what had appeared to be solid mathematical relationship. Through this opening, Ben perceived the heart of the problem, the precise point where probability itself collapsed under external pressure. Moving with careful precision, he approached this nexus point. The Chaquetrix pulsed with increasing intensity, resonating with the fundamental mathematics surrounding them. When he reached the optimal position, Ben opened his cerebrocrustacean cranium, exposing the enhanced brain that glowed with both bioelectric energy and crystalline resonance patterns. Initiating probability restructuring sequence, he announced, electricity arcing from his brain to interface with the surrounding mathematical constructs. The moment connection established, Ben's consciousness expanded exponentially. Where his previous interventions had required tremendous focus and energy, this engagement occurred primarily on the intellectual plane, his enhanced mind processing quintillions of calculations per second, identifying pattern deterioration and implementing corrective algorithms with precision impossible for conventional intelligence. Through this connection, he perceived the true nature of the negation entities more clearly, beings whose very existence represented probability collapse, whose consciousness operated according to principles of certainty rather than possibility. They existed in opposition to quantum uncertainty, seeking to replace the infinite branching of potential futures with singular, predetermined outcome. Working with mathematical precision enhanced by the Chaquetrix's dimensional understanding, Ben began restructuring the probability matrices, not forcing them back to their original configuration, which would only invite renewed attack, but creating balanced uncertainty that preserved quantum potential while acknowledging external pressure. The process required intellectual capacity beyond anything he'd previously accessed, manipulating abstract concepts at levels where mathematics, philosophy, and physics became indistinguishable. Throughout, he remained aware of Nix's shadow presence alongside him, occasionally adjusting variables he couldn't fully perceive, guiding his work through subtle mathematical suggestions. After several minutes of intense calculation, the probability streams began stabilizing, not returning owe their original infinite branching but settling into sustainable patterns that maintained essential quantum uncertainty while acknowledging convergence pressures. The mathematical chaos resolved into complex but harmonious relationship, dimensional barriers reinforcing at critical junctions. Ben closed his cranium, the electrical connection fading as he completed the stabilization sequence. Probability matrices temporarily realigned, dimensional integrity restored to sustainable parameters. Estimated stability duration, approximately 112 hours before requiring renewal. Nyx's shadow form flowed through complex configurations that somehow conveyed approval. Acceptable solution within temporal constraints. The void acknowledges your contribution, bearer of the key. Reality shifted around them again as Nyx transported them back to the probability chamber. Upon return, Ben reverted to human form, the intellectual exertion leaving him momentarily disoriented despite the Chaquetrix's supportive energy. 4 convergence points stabilized, Aquaria observed, her liquid form rippling with cautious optimism. Only the Inferno Sanctum remains untreated, and presents the greatest diplomatic challenge. Chaquetrix added grimly, her silicon plates shifting in patterns suggesting deep concern. Pyrolus will not welcome our arrival. Nyx's shadow form coalesced into more humanoid configuration. Those universe-containing eyes focusing on each of them in turn. Flame resists pattern recognition. Chaos embodies her nature as order defines mine. Yet mathematical CER. Tainty remains. Without 5-point synchronization, dimensional collapse progresses beyond restoration threshold. Then we have no choice but to secure her cooperation, Ben stated simply, having recovered his equilibrium. The Chaquetrix shows all 5 focal points must be stabilized simultaneously for permanent resolution. Cooperation, Nyx echoed, the concept flowing through her shadow form like ripples through darkness. Pyrolus comprehends this concept differently than mathematical necessity would suggest optimal. A diplomatic way of saying she's completely unpredictable and potentially hostile, Aquaria translated. Liquid features forming a grimace. Her response to crisis typically involves increasing the surrounding chaos rather than establishing order. Ben studied the assembled queens thoughtfully. With each addition to their coalition, group dynamics grew increasingly complex. Lumina's crystalline precision balanced against Chaquetrix's silicon strength, both contrasting. With Aquaria's fluid adaptability and Nyx's abstract perspective. Adding Pyrolus's volatile nature to this mixture would require careful diplomatic management. I'm guessing your history with Pyrolus is complicated. He asked Nyx directly. The Shadow Queen's form shifted through several configurations before settling on one that approximated ironic amusement. Complicated contains insuffici, nth-dimensional variables to express our relationship. Opposites defined by mutual exclusion yet requiring balanced coexistence. Where I represent possibility constrained by pattern, she embodies potential unleashed without limitation. They tried to obliterate each other during the third convergence, Chaquetrix stated more bluntly. The resulting conflict restructured 73 star systems and created a dimensional anomaly that required 3 millennia to stabilize. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.